Hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 13th, and we bring you episode 80 of Block Digest at block height 509,054. Mr. Rick is feeling good enough to join us today, so missed you last time, Rick.
Hey, thanks, man, for the kind words. Feeling a little bit better. Appreciate it. How y'all doing today, folks?
And got Mr. JW, and I think me and him are going to have an interesting debate towards the end of the episode today.
What are you talking about? I agree with everything.
Janine?
Yo.
Uh-oh. I think that was perfectly timed lag tonight. Say hi. Yeah.
Wait, I'm lagging?
I didn't hear anything when you unmuted. And we also got Mr. Acnix from the Bitcoin Bus.
Hey.
All right, and I guess hopefully Janine will be back in just a second. But I guess let's slide along to the first thing to laugh at today. Hey, guys, Ethereum ASICs. I mean, am I the only one wondering why Bitmain would spend shit tons of money developing very memory-intensive ASICs if they're actually going to move to proof of stake soon? And real quick, for people who don't understand how the mining process in Ethereum works, it pretty much uses a DAG structure as kind of the core for the proof of work. And this is something that continually grows in size as the network progresses. So for anybody who's actually mined Ethereum before, you'll know that older and older graphics cards have kind of slowly become obsolete for mining because they don't have enough memory to actually hold the DAG. And so what Bitmain's doing here is pretty much creating an ASIC miner with about 72 gigabytes of RAM so that they can hold the DAG in there and continue mining as it grows, as the blockchain progresses linearly. And yeah, I mean, like, anybody else think this is as silly as I think it is?
Well,
yeah,
really gets me thinking classic, right? Like, holy shit. They have been going this entire time saying, hey, we're going to keep mining alive. And now, like, you know, hey, there's this huge investment in ASICs. They're out there now. And Ethereum has this suffering roadmap where ASICs aren't a picture of that. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thinking about, you know, Bitmain they're talking about developing that ASIC for Siacoin, and now they're talking about developing this ASIC for Ethereum. It just gets me thinking, like, you know, I'm wondering if they are just like understanding that, you know, these bigger competitors are coming onto the scene in Bitcoin, and so it makes sense to try and take like a firm stance in these other altcoins and their mining and trying to, you know, just gain some power in all these other coins and in the way that they're mined. And I don't know, I just sort of like put it in that comparison of like, yeah, they're starting to go into these altcoins. They did Litecoin a while back, Siacoin, now Ethereum. Yeah, they're just kind of spreading out their power across the crypto ecosystem, which doesn't bother me that much if it's true. I mean, I don't know, at least kind of just, you know, spread out outside of Bitcoin, let that competition in the Bitcoin network pick up.
Yeah, I just gotta think that this is just a bad investment. It reminds me of all the crap that Roger Ver's been investing in lately. He just can't seem to pick a company to throw money at that's not on the verge of becoming obsolete. And I would say that it almost seems too stupid not to be intentional, but most venture capital firms, they're really terrible too. So, and he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So I'm going to go ahead and bet that he's accidentally just investing in stuff like ShapeShift, like when atomic swaps are right around the corner, right? And all of these goofy little things like ATMs, when people are going to be able to do prepaid or, you know, loaded cards at 7-Eleven, right? Just like they get cell phone minutes and stuff like that, right? He seems to be batting like perfectly zero. And I think because of that, it makes me think that Jihan might just be stupid enough to think that this is a good idea, even though all the altcoins, I think, I mean, maybe this is optimism, but I think all the altcoins are going to have a really hard couple of years ahead of them with Lightning being out. confidential transactions and all the other stuff coming down the way. Like it seems like we're finally going to be pulling away from the pack of, you know, lunacy here. So I don't know. I'd kind of be surprised if he gets his money back on that, but I hope that that's the case. I hope that he's just kind of a bad actor and a bad entrepreneur, and he'll have less influence on the community as a result of these goofy ideas.
Well, it's a big market, right? So maybe in here is to see how the market reacts. I mean, Ethereum doesn't want an ASIC coming along. It is, right? So maybe there's another angle here.
Well, see, this really has me thinking, like, what is the long-term, like, you know, direction that Ethereum is going to go in? Because it's a very common kind of joke with Ethereum that proof of stake is just the disincentive to make ASICs. Like, don't go making ASICs, guys, because we're moving to proof of stake soon, TM. And like, now that we're actually at the point where this has been produced, like, how is Vitalik going to react to this? Like, how is the Ethereum community going to react to this? Because, like, proof of stake is fundamentally broken. Like, it cannot work without a high concentration of wealth and pretty much functioning as a centralized system. Otherwise, you have no real way to enforce that gradual, like, certainty of arriving at a singular consensus. Like, proof of work does this because it's literally real world resources in the terms of electricity being burned as a cost that guarantee that eventual convergence to consensus in the same system. But with proof of stake, like, there is no external cost incurred there. It's all completely internalized in the system. And so, like, you know, is this going to be the final, like, straw here that's the cat's out of the bag? Like, proof of stake has been and always will be bullshit? Or are they going to actually try to push this out now and stop dancing around the fact that it can't really work at scale without being highly centralized?
Yeah, to put this in context, though, this is all security theater, right? Like, this is the TSA, right? Yes, if you want to, you can bring bad things on an airplane. It's not hard. But yes, we're going to make you go through a bunch of hassle and take your shoes off and all this other stuff, right? Like, Ethereum is a database that Vitalik controls. If he doesn't like what's in there, he takes it out. If he does like what's in there, it stays. So this whole mining thing is just like a bunch of whirling dervishes in the first place. And if they want to throw more money and more electricity into this this sort of publicity stunt, making it seem like they have a blockchain, I guess go for it.
You had something to say, Rick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say proof of stake was always kind of like misty as far as, like, it was just, yeah, it's something that's always sort of sat there, and I guess it's been a disincentive for people to develop ASICs, but it really is so I don't know, just out there as far as, like, something that's you could actually use, where, yeah, it's like I think it is kind of BS. Like, I figured it's BS. Like, how are you gonna do it? I don't know, and pull it off to where it works, and, you know, it's something that's valuable. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe Bitmain's calling their bluff on that one with this. It's interesting thought.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's also, like, where can this, like, go as far as, like, business operations for Bitmain? Like, I know I've mentioned it a few times that they're actually doing a lot of research in ASICs for machine learning to try to make that as efficient as possible, and kind of my speculation of that inevitably leading to kind of a tight contracting relationship with the Chinese government, because they're pretty much applying deep learning, like, everywhere. Like, they have street cameras everywhere. Like, you can literally get a ticket in China for crossing the street in a red light on a bicycle, because it will snap a picture of your face, like, run you through a facial recognition database, and you get a ticket. Like, they've just recently started rolling out, like, a kind of Google Glass headset design for police, and they're actually deploying this at, like, major public areas like train stations looking for fugitives. And, like, that's a huge business opportunity for Bitmain outside of ASICs for cryptocurrency mining. And the way that like I was saying earlier, the entire DAG structure and how memory intensive that is with Ethereum mining, like, this is also another branch that could potentially lead outside of like the narrow field of cryptocurrency mining ASICs, because this same kind of design or equipment could be turned around and used as a GPU. I mean, that's effectively kind of what this has to be to function as a miner. It's just basically a more powerful GPU with a lot more memory. And so like now it's like they're kind of, you know, like I was very, very hopeful about the potential of them as a company just being running to the ground. And I mean, I'm still very hopeful that they're going to lose stake in Bitcoin mining. But I mean, to see the way they're kind of branching out and the different possibilities for products they can build, I don't think that they, as a company as a whole, are just going to disappear anytime soon, because they now have like 2 potential branch offs as far as what they can do as a company to generate revenue, independent from just ASICs for cryptocurrency mining. And like it sucks. I mean, like what can we do?
Yeah, yeah, it's not very cool. Like developing the hardware that's going to scan through all the facial recognition data to make sure you get busted. But yeah, I mean, like that sort of tech is, I guess, eventually going to get here. But to think that Bitmain's going to be the guys pushing it forward is kind of that's not cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like they're not going to be able to compete in those other areas. They seem to have been really focused on Bitcoin, and I don't know. I mean, it's cutthroat, right? That is the most competitive sort of business that you can be in, and you're competing with Intel and, you know, all these major players. And I don't know.
Isn't it like inside government contracts? Really, you're dealing with the same guys. Really, you know, it's like you got IBM, Intel, like you're saying. Like, I mean, I don't know if the competition's really there. It feels like it's sort of I mean, you have these businesses that could do it for you. But
yeah, I mean, there is a high barrier to entry in this stuff. Like, there's a lot of money that you have to have in order to become a player, and there, you know, so maybe it's more like cell phone companies where there's not a lot of competition. But I don't know. I get the impression that it's somewhere between that and, like, you know,
I mean, but look at it.
Spin up overnight, because there's so many. There's so much money to be made in that space, and it's maturing so rapidly. It really does feel like there's a lot of competition, at least from the consumer standpoint. I feel like there must be a lot of competition based on what I'm seeing, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, like really think about like the dynamics of that market. Like the real barriers are access to foundries and then the actual capital for research and development. And I mean, just through ASICs for crypto mining, like they're at the point where they're literally taking up more foundry time, like having more wafers produced than NVIDIA. And that is a lot of capital. Like they like they're in a position now just with ASIC manufacturing for crypto. They've kind of shot past the production quotas of a major company like NVIDIA. And if they really are intelligent in reinvesting that in research and development, like crypto chips could effectively be that bootstrap to really get them to the level where they can start trying to compete against giants like NVIDIA or AMD or Intel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but what you're saying is they have a bunch of capital. If they reinvest that capital wisely into R&D and come up with better products, and they'll stay in business. Yeah, that's true. But that's really, really freaking hard, right? Like, it's really, if you had $1 billion, chances are you wouldn't have $1 billion in a couple of years, because it's really, really hard to find the technologies to invest in and make the right bets to keep that pile growing. And I don't see a lot in their history that tells me that they're great at that, right? It seems like these guys picked a niche, it was successful, you know, that could be almost random chance, right? Because they kind of went after an area that nobody else wanted. And I haven't seen that they've diversified in any way successfully. So I would have a tendency to think that they're one-hit wonders, but, you know, we'll see.
Well, I mean, like, honestly, I kind of worry about the opposite on this, like, where it's like these other companies, they just don't pay attention to this cryptocurrency mining as something that they should be worried about. Now we're seeing graphics cards selling out of Best Buys where they're telling people they can only buy one graphics card per customer and all this stuff. And it just like, yeah, I mean, like, I can kind of see like them not paying attention to it enough to where, like, you know, even video games, like the graphics haven't gotten so memory intensive enough to where they need to build something that's can handle the memory intensity of like searching through an entire database of everybody's face in the nation of China.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, they're
something where-
paying attention to it now, though, right? I mean,
well, now that's what we're saying.
when all that stuff is off the shelf, but that's fine, right? Like a big company like Nvidia can completely ignore that.
But there's a whole other
market
dynamic of this, though. Like when you look at China, I mean, through pretty much the entirety of the 20th century and so far the 21st, like they've followed this pattern where you have these incumbent Western companies in the technology sector who do something, and pretty much the pattern repetitively, time after time, has been, we're just going to do the Chinese version of it. Like you have like Google, they produced Baidu. Like you have like eBay, they produced Alibaba. You have Apple, they have Hui. I probably pronounced that wrong, but like you know what I mean. Like China has a tendency to kind of isolate itself from global markets and produce their own domestic versions of things. So when you look at Bitmain being a Chinese company, that's a really important dynamic to think about in my mind, because they do have the potential to start eating into that market and lead to the exclusion of foreign competitors.
Right, but do you think any of those knockoffs are as good as the original?
Well, that's the thing. It's like slow and gradual. Like they've bootstrapped themselves with Bitcoin ASICs, started branching out into other cryptocurrencies. They're doing research on ASICs for applied deep learning, which is something, like I said, that makes no sense to me without a hope for a kind of contractor relationship with the Chinese government. And if they can really like push the development for something like an Ethereum ASIC into the direction of more general purpose GPUs. I mean, like look at virtual reality coming along on the horizon. Like the higher quality resolution that you try to apply to a visual technology like that, the resources are going to get ridiculous. And like this, you see what I mean? The kind of potential there for them to kind of leapfrog into like chips specifically tailored for things like that.
Yeah, I don't see them competing with Intel, but we'll see. Well, I mean, you just got to think of all the intellectual sort of capital that a company like Intel has. They're always pushing the limits. They're always spending a lot of time doing R&D, and they hire the best people in general, right? And so it's possible that they'll beat them. I just don't see anything in their history that really tells me that, because the only place that they've thrived is in a niche where all of the guys that we would think of as excellent, AMD, Intel, all those big brand names, just ignored that space, right? So, we'll see. I mean, I'd like to see them fight it out, right? But they haven't. It's kind of like saying, they have the title belt, but nobody else showed up, right? And now at some point, they're actually going to have to get in the ring with one of the champions. I don't see any reason I'd be putting my money on them, but maybe.
The only thing that I like, I don't know. It's just like the space has been ignored long enough to where I feel like these guys just like they're not ready to compete. And like, I mean, like I was saying earlier, like Intel and IBM and all these companies, they haven't really had to be profitable in a long time because of their government contracts, and they just installed 0 days and all this sort of stuff for the government, to where like maybe you're right. Maybe they finally realize like, hey, this is important and we should put our top guys on this. But are they really going to be able to jump up to speed with like the way that things are being manufactured in this ASIC field and mining field? I don't know. I mean, like I'd like to see it.
They're not new to making
really
ASICs,
like to see it.
right? Like they make lots of freaking ASICs. They just have decided not to make ASICs for this field up until now. But there wasn't all that much profit in it, right? This was a niche thing until just a couple of years ago. And these big companies, they can't do anything within 24 months, right? Like it takes 12 months just to go, oh, there's money to be made here. Let's start setting up some meetings to talk about getting that money, right? It takes a long time to move those big ships, but yeah, I wouldn't want to compete with Intel when it comes to ASICs. I would much rather personally compete with somebody that has no long track record of dominating a competitive space.
Yeah, I mean, either which way, like I think it will at least like we're saying, you know, they're coming into it. Like, I think they've realized like that they can't ignore it anymore, because like the graphics cards are selling out, and they're like got a secondary market that's at a premium, and it's something that they need to get under control. And yeah, I mean, Bitmain branching into Ethereum and all these other, you know, whatever they can mine. I mean, hopefully it's just going to drive more competition into the Bitcoin mining field. And, you know, yeah, hopefully some of these guys that have been top of their field for a long time but have ignored the space will jump in and really prove me wrong about, you know, them just ignoring it.
Yeah, and I think the reason that things are flying off the shelf and they haven't paid attention to the space is that there's the uncertainty factor, right? Like we all believe that mining is going to continue, but even I'm pretty skeptical about all these altcoin mining, right? Like I kind of feel like if I was at Intel, I'd be saying, look, maybe we do Bitcoin ASICs, but as I'm looking at the playing field, I don't see the competitive advantages of any of these. In fact, most of them are just complete well, actually, all of them are making false claims, right? So if I was in the conference room, I'd be like, do you really want to, you know, set up our foundries and have our best teams work on a product that we can all determine is a fraud, and by the definition of like doesn't do what it says it's going to do? And you guys realize that these are all like 5-year sort of investment cycles. So if we put all our money into freaking Litecoin, and then over the next 5 years, people realize, oh my gosh, Litecoin, what? Like this is the stupidest thing in the world, then we're screwed, right? So I think we probably underestimate how much they have to account for the possibility that this stuff goes away. And in their mind, Bitcoin might go away, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know when they're going to be here, but once they believe it's going to stick around, they'll be here.
Yeah, I think maybe that you know, hesitant to do it is also just because, like, yeah, I mean, some big company like Intel all of a sudden says they're going to be producing I don't know. It's like it brings into question, like, is the hashing algorithm still going to be SHA-256 whenever they get pushed to market, all that sort of stuff. So I can see why they're hesitant to do it, but it looks like they are stopping to ignore it because, like, this is kind of getting out of the whole experimental part of this proposition.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like the possibility of a proof of work change, that would definitely be on my slide, right? I'd be like, hey, I think we should do this Bitcoin mining thing. There seems to be a lot of money here, but I don't know. It's kind of a weird community, and there's quite a few of them that are pushing for a proof of work change, which would basically brick our $1 billion of investment. So, what do we think the odds of that are? Greater than 10%? Let's wait, right?
It's enough to certainly wait.
Yeah, which is why we got to stop these guys from talking about a proof of work change. It just, all it's going to do is continue to give the incumbents an advantage because it's going to scare away competition.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, like, until we actually see things like censorship, until we actually see an attack, like, it's emotionally, like, childish. Like, this is a system that is supposed to function on a foundation of economic incentives. And if we don't actually let that play out until we can concretely see them failing to work or falling apart, then how can you, like, honestly say in an intellectually honest way that you are trying to build a decentralized system? Like, things like a change like proof of work is a reactive measure to an actual attack, not something that you should be championing just because of your subjective view or interpretation of how you see the landscape. Because that is a fundamental change that cannot be wound back, cannot be undone. And you're just never going to have consensus for it until there is an actual attack, until you concretely see the incentives fail to work. And if you really want to, like, move away from an ASIC coin, there's Bitcoin Gold. Like, if you really cared, here, don't sell your coins on that fork. If you want to move completely away from Bitcoin into something, there's Monero. Like, there are other options out there. But to, like, this ridiculous, like, childish tendency to just, like, it's pretty much equivalent to the exact same crap that led to Bitcoin Cash. Like, we want to do something now, so do it. Well, everybody has to agree, or you can go off onto your own system and have fun with that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where if you stop and ask yourself what happens next, right? Like there's a lot of things in economics where it seems like a really good idea, but then you say, well, what are people going to do in response to that? And it turns out like the answer is dead people, dead babies, right? It's going to be the result. If we do a change to the proof of work, yes, that does brick all existing miners. But then what happens to our chain, right? We now have to run generic processors or whatever to secure that. Now, what if a malicious actor decides to build an ASIC? Then we're not talking about like a double spend problem anymore. Like the whole chain is very questionable, because if they could get ASICs, they could go back and rewrite maybe pretty far into history if all of a sudden we're, have a very small amount of hash power. So now you're talking about, like a retroactive sort of double spend, or basically being able to erase balances into the past. That's way, way worse than some period of time having to put up with censorship where I can't move my money, but I still have it. So this whole idea, I mean, even in a really bad situation, and I tweeted out the other day that I think it's possible that we would see some sort of censorship or 51% attack in order to support the idea of a proof of work change, because I really think the altcoin stuff is on its last legs. But if we do see that, I hope that everybody doesn't go, okay, well, now we're seeing some censorship, so we should definitely do a proof of work change, because all that does is make our entire network really, really weak when it's over. We don't get stronger as a result. We're just way, way more vulnerable to attack after a proof of work change.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point, and I really always considered that a nuclear option, last resort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like a nuclear option where you shoot yourself, right? It's not like somebody said it was like mutually assured destruction. It's sort of, I guess, but it's more like mutually assured destruction where we send most of our missiles at ourselves and our allies. And then, incidentally, we're going to get some Russians in the process.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of ASICs and proof of work changes, this is an announcement from the Monero team, and pretty much what they have said is they will proactively make changes to the proof of work if there is any indication of ASICs being developed. And they're actually now going to start making gradual changes to the proof of work regularly with each hard fork they do. Right now, about every 6 months. And they kind of go a little bit into the rationalization of this. For instance, just the inherent centralization effect of progressing from something like a CPU to a GPU to an ASIC, and just how that inherently will increase the centralization of the mining network in the process of making that move. And that's actually a huge part of the crypto note mining algorithm that Monero is based on. It was pretty much specifically designed to kind of level the playing field between CPUs and GPUs, so that both of those kind of are relatively on the same playing field. And they kind of go a little more into the fact that, as these systems evolve, and these are some very realistic threats that Bitcoin could have to deal with someday. When you have specific purpose chips being produced, like, hey, what happens if the government goes knock, knock, you have to put a backdoor in this? Or knock, knock, you have to apply for this license to buy and operate these things. Or knock, knock, we're going to take all of your mining equipment and you have no, Giacomo said this the other week when we had him on to talk about sidechains. Like, you have no plausible deniability with something like an ASIC if somebody shows up and goes, what are you doing with this? Like, you're mining Bitcoins, and there's nothing you can really do to kind of rationalize around that. And, this is, these systems are kind of complicated and constantly evolving. And these are things that we very well might have to deal with in Bitcoin one day. And so it's, as much as I am against a proof of work change in Bitcoin until we actually see some kind of attack, I do kind of like the fact that you do have an alternative project out there like Monero, who is kind of thinking towards the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Like, we're already in this place where ASICs are not a factor. And so we're going to kind of maintain that situation, because that's part of the entire rationale for like their security model, is they want maximal decentralization all the way through the stack. And I mean, where we're at with Bitcoin right now, especially with mining, we kind of have to rely more on relative like distribution of the hash power, but it's not really that decentralized in absolute terms. Like we're kind of at the point where we just have to rely on the relative distribution between players to kind of maintain an even distribution. And like that's something we're just going to kind of have to deal with. Like the scale we're at, like the way things are starting to kind of intertwine themselves with geopolitics, like, I mean, that might be a direction things go. And we're going to have to kind of wait and see and deal with it as it evolves.
I think that that proof of work change on Monero's side is it's interesting to see. But I mean, like you're saying, these things are evolving, and you know, one of the things that Monero is doing is you know, they're striving for this privacy, and there's other guys in that market too. But like, there's this whole side of this thing that we're going to get into later with the advertising and web mining and that model and how exactly that's going to play out in long term. And if you want that, then yeah, you need to be certain that there's not ASICs out there mining that thing. Like, you know, if the model is like it's a replacement for advertising money, and it's like a background miner that's like across all computing systems, and yeah, like you really don't need an ASIC in there for if that's going to be part of your model, because yeah, Monero has really always been sort of interesting with its crypto night algorithm and ring CT, and you know, but I have like read some things about like, you know, it's like you can't audit all the way back. It's like you're this trade-offs, like this it's not quite as decentralized mining as Monero and Bitcoin side, but the added hash power blows up the security really high. So I mean, yeah, these systems are evolving, and like you said, you know, Monero is something different, and it's always been kind of interesting. But yeah, it's still growing. It's getting its legs. You know, they got a competent dev team over there. And I think this is just showing that competence. Like they understand that these, that as far as like where they're going, they need things to kind of be like they are now. And it's really hard in this world where a value attains a coin, and like a coin attains a value that's high enough to where ASICs start getting developed. So yeah, it's always pretty interesting over there in Monero.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of part of like why in Bitcoin in particular, although in any cryptocurrency really, it's so important to run a fully validating node. Because in Bitcoin's case, at least, we've seen mining kind of slip like through our fingers. Like when I first got into this space, I was mining. Like that was part of using the system from my point of view. And after time, I was not able to continue to do so profitably. And so really, like the full node is our last line of defense. Like the mining in absolute terms is not very decentralized, but if it maintains a kind of even keel of distribution and people are actually using full nodes to interact economically with the network, well, then it's kind of not that bad. Like if a group of miners really tries to do something malicious, like they're limited to operating within the confines of the rules. Because like, hey, if 100% of the hash power tomorrow just said we're going to start mining 100 Bitcoins every block, well, the rest of the economy, the rest of the user base would just ignore them. And if they really just stubbornly continued doing that, well, eventually we would get to the point we're going to change the proof of work because you're not facilitating operation of the system. And we have things to bind. So.
Yeah, this just reminds me of like a gun-free zone, right? Like we want our security guards not to carry guns because we want everybody to be able to have clubs, and that way security will be decentralized. We'll all be on an equal footing. So we're just going to put up a fence, and we're just going to put up signs and say nobody's allowed to bring guns into this area, and we'll all be nice and egalitarian. The problem with that is that there's nothing stopping the bad guys from being guns and bringing guns into the gun-free zone, right? So when Monero says, "Hey, we're gonna do what we can to make sure that nobody will ever have ASICs in this space," all they're doing is preventing the good guys from being able to use the most advanced technology that we have available to efficiently solve these problems as efficiently as humanity is able to solve them, right? Get to that point where we're building ASICs and we're down at the 10 nanometer range as soon as possible, because that's where the bad guys will play if they feel like playing, right? Instead, we're just going to kind of put our head in the sand. So I think that, being ASIC hard is a security feature, right? Not being ASIC hard is just being weak. So I really don't agree with the strategy at all. But I'm glad somebody else is doing it other than Bitcoin.
I mean, I can appreciate the rationale, but I mean, like we just saw with Bitmain producing Ethereum ASICs, you make it as memory hard as you want. Eventually, when the economic incentives are there, somebody's going to build an ASIC. Like you physically can't make a proof of work algorithm that is like immune to ASICs. It's just a matter of time and how long it takes for the economic incentives to be great enough to get people to actually build it.
Right. So what I would say is you want to get to the end game as soon as possible, right? I think it's great that Bitcoin picked a proof of work algorithm that was so easy to make ASICs for, because we got to that game faster than we would have otherwise, right? Right now, it would be very expensive for a bad guy or a group of bad guys to invest in ASICs and try to attack Bitcoin, because they'd only be able to improve ever so slightly, right? But if you wanted to, you could definitely go and attack Monero right now and have an ASIC that's, I don't know, 10,000 times more efficient than anything that's out there, and you could just dominate. So I think, like I said, I think you want the security to be using the height of everything that humanity knows how to do, right? And that is something in the range of 10 nanometer ASICs.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, like we're saying, it's interesting, but there's definitely a security flaw there. I mean, somebody could, this is open source development, somebody could be in that Monero development and see where we're hashing algorithm's going to change to, and then just start developing for it. And yeah, as soon as it changes, then they will, have some farm somewhere and launch it up. But it's all like in the game theory of things, like, are you destroying the value proposition of whatever it is that you're doing? And I don't know. I haven't really thought about that all the way through, but it's certainly a security flaw there.
If you're not trying to be state hard, right? Like if you don't want to have something that's so immutable, a government wouldn't be able to attack it, then it doesn't matter, right? Because it's all just security theater anyway. Ethereum, just run around, slap each other and feel good and pretend that you've got a blockchain. But if you're trying to build something where if the United States government and China decided to get together and attack it, it could stand up and survive. You don't sit around and try to delay getting to the point where you're using, the best that we can do.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Mm-hmm. And then second part in this announcement from Monero, not really related to the proof of work, but I think this is very critically important, is part of the way that Monero obscures the transaction graph is pretty much just through the ring signature process. They're kind of just grabbing random other outputs and including those in your transaction. And so, recently, forgive me, I forget the name of it, but Monero just had a fork created. And the privacy implications for claiming a fork of Monero are much worse than other cryptocurrencies out there. Because the way that this works, when you try to transact, it will just grab a random set of transactions and mix those with yours. And so if you have an output on Monero, and you spend it on the main Monero chain and then spend it on the fork chain, you're going to have different signatures and transactions that's mixed with. And so it is much easier to kind of isolate which outputs are actually the coins being spent in a ring CT transaction. So very important, if you are using Monero, do not go and claim coins on a fork that requires you to use the same key, because it is much more damaging for your privacy and much more damaging for everybody else's privacy in the way you can kind of correlate things with ring CT transactions across chains. So if there are any Monero users out there, please do not just run off and just claim every shit fork of Monero if this starts becoming a regular thing. It will be incredibly undermining to the privacy properties of Monero.
Yeah, I mean, that part is the primary reason that I added this post from Monero to the news desk, because we had just been talking about United Bitcoin in the last show, which all of these forks are, I feel, especially due to the actors involved in them, like Jeff Garzik, I feel like a lot of these forks are specifically intended to trick users into coalescing all of their Bitcoin so that they can take advantage of the fork coins. And then, that makes it a lot easier to map all of the coins with identities. So definitely if you're someone who uses a more privacy focused coin like Monero, you do not want to be making that mistake, because obviously coins like Monero are, I have no doubt, they're under a lot more scrutiny than Bitcoin in terms of how much resources law enforcement are trying to put on it to analyze. Just because if you're using Monero, it's kind of assumed that you're trying to get more privacy. Even then with Bitcoin, which offers some privacy, but obviously not as much. But if you're using Monero, it's kind of assumed by law enforcement that you're up to nefarious activities. And so they're probably putting a lot of resources into it. And so it's definitely not a good idea to be compromising your privacy to take advantage of forks.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I forget the exact context, but a few months ago, we actually covered something on a statement from the FBI, who were specifically worried about kind of how Bitcoin plays out, potentially driving people to Monero, and being a lot more scared about the higher degree of anonymity that offers, which would obviously make their jobs a lot harder.
Yeah, and you're right. I think Monero's kind of in that Silk Road phase, like Bitcoin was, as far as like, oh, if you're using it, it's nefarious, like definitely darknet markets or money laundering or something like that. So yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot more law enforcement working on how to exactly track where the large wallets are and what it's being used for. And yeah, like you're saying, these forks like United Bitcoin, like, yeah, you make a claim and then next thing you know, you're KYC'd and your wallets are exposed. And there you go. I mean, this is it's constant, like, what are you using the system for? And like, it's I don't know. It's one of these things where if you're trying to do that game, it's a hard game to play. That's why I guess the returns are so good on that one. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess we're ready for the next one, guys?
Yeah, sure, man.
Alrighty then. This I am not very, very happy with. I know BitConnect was pretty much an outright scam and a Ponzi scheme, but there are now people who are literally pretty much trying to incite violence or gain information so that they can actively participate in violence. And they're calling themselves the crypto watchdogs and pretty much planning on issuing their own token to pay out bounties for information on anybody involved in BitConnect, anybody who has been promoting BitConnect.
Yeah, that was my favorite part. Like, you're responding to fraud and scamminess in another coin. You're like, hey, we're going to launch our own coin and it's going to be about justice. Like, that's not going to backfire on you.
Yeah, but I mean, this is fucked up. I mean,
well, wait a minute. Why do you think that these guys are talking about like having these guys killed or something? If they're just offering a bounty for information on these bad guys, that sounds, other than that, there's obviously some bullshit token involved. But
well, I mean,
that
like
seems
KW,
reasonable.
like what else are they getting at here? Like literally verbatim quote: "We are coming for every one of you. We know where you are, and we know what you're doing and when." I mean, like it's.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
but I mean, people hire private investigators all the time, and it's totally normal to throw out a reward for information leading to the arrest of or something like that. So I don't know, man. I
I mean, this is dangerous and reckless. Like, this will lead to violence. Mark my words. And as we've seen with like swatting becoming like a widely done thing nowadays, is even within the crypto community. Like, how are they going to know any information provided to them is accurate? Like, how do they know people aren't going to just start scouring the internet for random people's information just to get money out of this? Like, this is unbelievably irresponsible and reckless. And this will lead to people getting hurt.
All right, let's put money on it. Let's bet. I bet you that it will not lead to people getting hurt.
All right. Let's make a bet. Dude. I'm in on that one.
Wait, are we opening some kind of lending market here?
Exactly.
I bet you one of these BitConnect guys gets beat up, and there's going to be like a picture of it. They're going to be like, I want my reward. And like, I just think that you're giving people too much credit. Like, you know.
Well, wait a minute. Let's put this in context.
I mean, like,
if one of these guys gets beat up, I'm good with that, right? Like, as far as violence against criminals, that's not something that most people are really averse to.
I don't know. I think if you're going to do this sort of thing, you got to have like a set, like, okay, you know, if you provide this information, you'll get this, like nothing where it's just so open-ended like this. That's where I think that you leave it open to interpretation and people are just going to run with it and say like, oh, well, there's some crypto bounty up for this guy and I'm going to go get him.
Yeah. I mean, Trevon James is literally locking himself in a resort hotel room and telling people if they're going to come fuck with him, at least let him like take his son and get him away from there or give him to a relative. I mean, like this, like JW, I get where you're coming from, but like this kind of shit spirals out of control. Like mob justice.
Oh, I agree. It's possible. I'm just saying it won't be because they're saying, hey, we want information, you know, or this goofy coin thing, right? But yes, if you defraud thousands and thousands of people of their life savings, you're probably looking at an ass beating if you're lucky. And yes, if you're hanging out in a hotel room with a 2-year-old and there's people that want to beat you for having destroyed their life, you're just a double asshole, right? And I'm not saying that there might not be some violence that comes of this. I just didn't read that and think, oh my gosh, you know, this is you know, hits and murder and you know, craziness. I don't think it's going to necessarily go that far.
Let me tell you a local story here, man, that just happened. This girl put up a Craigslist ad asking for someone to she put a hit out on herself, and before she could really even, you know, work it around it, like, yeah, she died, like, because you know, people are just that, you know, crazy. I mean, like, you put a hit out on yourself and next thing you know, you got murdered. And I mean, I just think you're giving people,
well, I mean, if it said $50,000 to kill somebody, then I would agree with you guys, right? And no, I don't think it's a safe thing to put a hit out on yourself, but
no, I'm just saying, like, saying that there is a crypto reward for this problem, and we haven't really laid out any sort of parameters as to what we want and what the reward will be and all that sort of stuff. It just, there's too many kooks out there that will be like, hey, I know somebody from this thing and they did this and there's some reward. Let's just go do it. Yeah, let's just go do it. We'll get a reward. And then they don't think about like any of that process where, I mean, like, you know, I don't know. This thing's kind of just, yeah, I don't know. This shit should have been happening back in 2009 with the banks.
Yeah, I mean, like, to kind of give you a little plug here, JW, like, I much prefer this, like, dark side Bitcoin wiki, like the villains of Bitcoin wiki that you're trying to build and get people to contribute to. Like, you don't go out and just take it upon yourself that, like, to just commit violence. You don't just assume, you just unilaterally, that you have a right to be violent towards other people. If things like this happen, like, condense the information, like, put the information in a public place, like, damage their reputation, save people from that future loss at the hands of scammers like this. But to just assume because you were scammed, and in my opinion, I don't think that any of these people have any right to engage in shit like this. They put their money in completely voluntarily. If they were too stupid to look into what this thing is, if they were too stupid to think about how this works and why they're getting money paid out, well, tough shit. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. You are responsible for your own money. And if you put it into a scam, if you put it into stupid shit, you've just paid for a very expensive life lesson. And I think that this kind of approach that you're trying to fucking like actually create is much more responsible and is much more in line with actually creating a positive change in this ecosystem, in this community.
Yeah, but to be clear, the reason that I'm doing this is just that I think it's more effective, right? I would be and I'm not endorsing that anybody goes out and beats somebody up that's stolen money from them or anything like that, right? But part of the reason that I'm not endorsing it is that it's really expensive to endorse something like that, right? Like I would personally fear that I would suffer unjustly if I said, look, if somebody slaps your wife, you can punch them, right? That's a risky thing for me to say, because then if that happens, the government can come take me and put me in a cage, and I've probably committed some kind of act of terror, right? But if we're saying that all things considered, it's way more practical the way the world operates right now to try to kind of do that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure thing and track guys like Roger Ver and say, this is what they've done in the past, and try to make people aware that he's not to be trusted. I mean, that's probably more cost effective in general, but it's certainly more cost effective in sort of the world that we live in right now. But at the same time, if somebody stole from you, I wouldn't consider it a crime, depending on, as long as your response was measured and appropriate, right? So, and that obviously is something that we would need a decent legal system with competing judges, to give a lot of time and effort to figure out what the precedent is and what is fair and just and what is like way over the top, chopping people up for stealing $5 from you sort of stuff. But in principle, I think the idea of justice is still totally legitimate. And I don't think that, like, one of the things that I won't say is that only governments can dish out justice, right? I don't believe that at all. If there's 10 guys out in the woods and one of them beats the crap out of somebody else, I think the other 8 can tie him up or do what they have to do and maybe even mete out some justice, right? Personally, I think that totally makes sense. But yeah, I mean, practically, I think as a community, we're way better off just trying to track these guys and help people become aware of what they've done in the past. And, then hopefully nobody gets screwed at all, right? I'd rather not see people go out and catch somebody that ripped them off. I'd rather see people just ignore them because they're a known scammer and maybe they actually have to go get a job. Like, Trayvon, he could have been flipping burgers or something, man. He could have been feeding people and doing good. Instead, he was out just screwing everybody over. So obviously I'd rather him making French fries than stealing from people. So, prevention is the better way to go.
Yeah. And I also want to remind everyone that one of the top 3 marketers of BitConnect was a 17-year-old kid. And so I definitely don't think it would be, even if the strategy was just to publish information about people, I don't think that in the case of a 17-year-old, it would be justified to, completely ruin their life over this. I mean, obviously, they seriously screwed over a bunch of people, or helped BitConnect as an organization screw over a bunch of people. But have to keep in mind that there's like not only, a 17-year-old kid, but there's a lot of family members like this toddler that Trayvon has that, are innocent parties to this. And so that has to be taken into account.
Right. That's where, what you're doing, JW, is a lot better approach on this, is just inform people beforehand. And that's where, when I was reading the story, like we've talked in the past about, like, can we work towards like legitimate courts and common laws and all these sorts of things. And when I was reading this story the first time, I was thinking about that and, had a little bit of a discussion where it's just like, this is like too far of a jump to think that we're ready for this sort of stuff now. It's like what you're doing, and we just take the appropriate steps to get there, because everybody's so kind of learning this thing as we go along that I really feel sorry for some guys like Trayvon. I don't 100% know that he knew he was scamming people, and
totally, that's a good point.
It's a possibility he was being scammed, and like he just pushed it because he knew he was making money. And I mean, if I'm making money, maybe these people can make money. And it's a scary thing to just jump from where we're at to like, hey, you know what? Let's deal with street justice right now. Like, I'm just not ready for it.
I think the biggest deterrent, if there is anybody listening that's like, you know, in Miami right now or trying to track down Trayvon, is you're not the police. If you overreact and you hurt somebody, or if it turns out that that somebody was innocent and they weren't really malicious, you will suffer the consequences for that, right? Like our justice system isn't so jacked up that if you as a private person trying to get justice accidentally shoot through a wall and kill some kid, you will probably die for it, right? Or spend a lot of time in prison. So, you know, that's probably the best like sort of sobering fact that I could offer anybody that's really pissed off and is wanting to go beat somebody up because they've been ripped off. You will be held to a reasonable standard of behavior, unlike the police that can just kill people accidentally and it's totally fine and they don't even lose their jobs over it. You will be. So don't get too excited.
Yeah, you know what? And hey, I mean, like BitConnect, for all their crap, they did produce some hell of a good meme, you know? Like they weren't like OneCoin where they were just running around pitching this obvious BS. They were really pushing some hardcore memes out there. So like, you know, I can understand how it got pushed out there, but like, you know, yeah, Trayvon's a character or Trevor, you know, whatever his name, he's a character. And like, it's, this space is so new and all that to just try and be like, yeah, well, we're ready for justice on this because everybody should have known better. It's absolutely not correct. And, you know, what you're doing, JW, that's the proper measured step towards that sort of system eventually one day in the future time.
Hey, so help me populate that. Anybody can go out to darksidebtc.com and it's just a wiki, right? So you can edit it. If you click on the homepage, you'll see that there's a lot of like scammers names, but there's not much filled out, right? Like Roger Ver only has like 4 or 5 sentences. So anybody that can put some time into that, especially if you can throw out links and reference material and stuff, please do it. It would definitely help out. And if you do a lot, I'll hook you up. I'll give you some tips, some Bitcoin tips for helping us out.
Yeah, people need to get that wiki together.
Alrighty. And then I guess when you thought a business in this space couldn't be any more fucking retarded, somebody's just gotta go and prove you wrong. Did you hear that ShapeShift and Bitcoin.com have joined forces? Bitcoin.com wallet users can now shift between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core. It only took about like 100-something replies going, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not a currency I've ever heard of. That got something like 3-4 times the likes their original tweet before they finally deleted it and said, we made a mistake, guys.
Oh, they did? They apologized already?
Yeah, they did.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't even see that.
Dr. Eva, air quotes, mistake.
Yeah, because like my first thought when I saw that tweet, I was like, oh, damn, Mr. Hodl's going to be really disappointed because he doesn't even use Bitcoin Core. He uses Bitcoin Knots.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a mistake, the part of the mistake was just saying Bitcoin Core. Like, that's not the thing that's so outrageous, right? The thing that's outrageous is partnering with Bitcoin.com, you know, Roger Ver tying up with him, endorsing that whole scam, right? And Bitcoin.com is still pushing people to buy Bitcoin Cash, right? Or Bcash. So it's not as if the greatest part of the offense was calling us, you know, calling the people that actually run Bitcoin Core.
Oh, I do very much think. Like, I think that partnering with Bitcoin.com is bad enough. Roger Ver is an outright scammer. But this nonsense is just kind of, in my opinion, an attempt to just desensitize people. Like, it's trying to put these, like, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin on even keel or even terms. They're not. There is Bitcoin, and there is the derivative forks of Bitcoin. The derivative forks are not Bitcoin. You cannot break off from something, derive your definition from something, and then also be that thing. Like, it is just logically nonsensical. And the fact that this argument is even being made is like, these people are living in a fantasy land. There is BTCD. there is Bitcoin knots. There is another client written in Go, I forget the name, by a big blocker of all people, who wrote an entirely independent Bitcoin implementation from scratch that was shown at the Future of Bitcoin conference, if I remember correctly. There are a number of different clients out there, and anybody is capable of writing their own client, their own implementation of Bitcoin from scratch. They will all converge to the same network, enforce the same consensus rules. So, like, where is the line of reasoning here? If it's Bitcoin Core now instead of Bitcoin, does that mean that I should be able to spin up all of these other clients, and when I go to withdraw from an exchange who chose to label it like this, I should get a coin from each of those clients, right? Like, I should get a Bitcoin if I withdraw 1 Bitcoin for each independent client that I run, right? Like, where is the logic here?
Yeah, I think the logic is strictly to, I mean, like, there isn't really, it's just to confuse people. Like, it's kind of the, I don't know. I was like reading this story and like some other stories where it's like, there are some Bcashers who kind of like the idea of being separate, like knowing that they're separate from Bitcoin. And then there's like this other crew that, they like the idea of still kind of like splitting hairs on this. And I don't know what's going on that side other than this is just like it feels like a continuation really of like all the players of SegWit 2x and Bcash sort of just like picking a side and figuring out where they want to be on this, like because I don't know, this core argument, I've heard it placed in such a ridiculous statement, like just to like you have to, it was just recently compared to as like genders on Twitter. I don't know, this argument just really gets infuriating because it's like I don't know, it's definitely being pushed from a side, but there's also the same side. Like there's some guys that are just like, like Jahan has been saying or said on Twitter, like, no, Bitcoin is Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin Cash. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's something going on that side where there's just there's still this like push to have this confusion attack going on, and
they have nothing left but lying. Like literally, they have nothing left but lying. Like I just got into a Twitter interaction with a Bitcoin Cash supporter before we came on the air, and he's still crying that Bitcoin Core controls things. His argument, 92% of the nodes are Bitcoin Core nodes. So that means they're in control. Like somehow, in a logical leap of ridiculous proportions, me choosing to run a specific piece of software means that whoever wrote that software is actually in control of my computer, in control of my brain, is the reason that I made this decision to use this piece of software, and that I, as an individual, have absolutely no agency, have made no decision on my own, and it's Bitcoin Core's in control. Because they didn't just do what we as a small minority wanted. They're in control. Like it's not because people disagree with them. It's not because people of their own free will made a choice to do something. No, it's Bitcoin Core is in control. The vast majority of people who disagree with us, they don't exist. They have no personal agency. They have no free will. They have no ability to make a choice. It's all Bitcoin Core. It's just outright delusional. Like it is literally living in a fantasy land.
Yeah, my favorite part about this, especially recently with people saying that like Bitcoin Core was pushing SegWit and SegWit is like a tool of Core, like that really tells me that they don't know anyone who actually runs the Bitcoin Core reference client, because if you did, you would know that the wallet that comes with Bitcoin Core didn't even have SegWit for several months after it was activated on the network. So clearly some people were using SegWit completely absent of the Bitcoin Core software. So like how do you square that circle, guys? And yeah, I thought, because Rick, you mentioned you had seen a tweet that was saying that, I saw it too, it was something like Bitcoin Cash is male and Bitcoin Core is female. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, why are we assuming the gender identity of software here?
I know, it was like, it's like they don't want to stop. It's like, you got to decide, are you this or that? Like, we're having it in everywhere. Are you male or female or somewhere in between? Like, are you core or are you not core? Like, that's it. Like, it's become just ridiculous. Like, in the argument, it kind of comes out of the woodwork every now and again, like every week or 2 weeks, it comes back out. That's where it's like, I feel like they don't quite know what they're wanting to attack on that side, other than like, there's definitely a group that want to keep pushing this like confusion of what is Bitcoin.
Yeah, and today there's been an ongoing thread that's been popping up in my mentions because JW mentioned me in a tweet like
no.
and now
I'm really responsible for bringing you into that.
Yes, you are.
That thing has been going on for so long. It's
Okay,
absolutely
I know.
Okay, so a few hours ago, I finally decided to mute the conversation, but I wanted to get removed from the thread because when I search for my tweets, I
did remove you, but
then
it's like this monster where people are replying to stuff that's like 4 or 5 weeks old. So it doesn't matter if I take you off.
Yeah. Anyway, so the thread was still continuing today, and as far as I could see, the last thing that was being discussed before I muted it was whether the different clients represent like different factions of Christianity. It's like,
oh, it's outright like I do want to like I'm still trying to polish up the last bit of stuff for the next ZK snacks. It's just I am neurotic about making sure everything is presented right in an understandable fashion, but I actually do want to like kind of break down if anybody here like wants to be involved in this, the talk that Chris DeRose gave at the Zurich Bitcoin meetup, because it is just logical fallacy after logical fallacy. And I mean, just to make a quick example.
Was that on the Bitcoin Civil War? Was that it?
Yeah, but to make a quick example here, he tries to bring into the picture the notion of a social contract, as was created during the 1700s in Europe, like through the French Revolution and so on, where people decided that monarchs had a social obligation to their subjects, and tried to equivocate this to Bitcoin development and Bitcoin developers as a monarch. And this is delusionally like fallacious. In the situation of monarchs in Europe, they actually took things from their subjects. They levied taxes. They took the value that these people generated. They actually took something from them. And the source of the assumed obligation for these rulers to provide some kind of service to their subjects is rooted entirely in the fact that they actually took something from these people. And in absolutely no way whatsoever are the developers working on Bitcoin, who take absolutely nothing from the users or owners of Bitcoin, they simply provide things of their own free will, equivalent to this dynamic in the Renaissance Europe between the elites and their subjects whatsoever. There is absolutely no logical equivalence between these two situations. And I'm kind of disappointed in Chris, because the fact that he would make a statement like that is just completely intellectually dishonest. Like he is not making an argument. He is spinning a narrative.
I'm not disappointed at all because my expectations were not high enough to begin with.
Oh my gosh, I was just typing that. I was just typing, I can't imagine a circumstance under which I could be disappointed in Chris DeRose.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, like, kind of was like the 2016 convention here in Denver. Like, he did a talk on scams, and like with the Bitcoin Uncensored, I know it was harsh, and it was kind of like it was very like Howard Stern or something. It wasn't very like appealing to everyone, but like for the most part, it seems like they like to stay on the idea of like what is fact and like stick to that. But yeah, it seems like here recently Chris has really spun off on just trying to find a narrative that's going to work as far as creating this argument with core. And I don't know, it seems like he's really big on the Monero boat right now, which like more go for it. But yeah, it's just stick this whole Bitcoin core, Bitcoin Cash argument and trying to place it in your own little weird framing of mind. Yeah, I don't know. Without John Seth, Chris, I'm sorry, man, but somebody needs to like be there to put you in check on some of these arguments you're making, because it just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too harsh, but I've had several conversations with them on Twitter, and every time they get to a point where they're at all interesting, he just completely checks out, right? So it feels very much like interacting with Krawitz or Paul Stork. I mean, there's an agenda of some kind, and it's not just to understand what's going on and have a real conversation. And, you know, I've offered several times, look, let's jump on Hangouts and let's talk this out, because this is so low bandwidth. It's hard to know whether you're scamming or actually ignorant. And, you know, he's always too busy when that comes up. But the guy's on my freaking Twitter feed for about 17 hours a day. So it's really getting hard for me to give him the benefit of the doubt at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. It's one of those things too, where it's like, yeah, even at this point, the discussion with Chris, it's like, I would just think that there's ulterior motives there at this point, where it's just like, he's just trying to discredit someone or, you know, spin the narrative. It's something that, like, I myself, like, as somebody that was watching Bitcoin Uncensored a lot, it's like kind of aggravating to me, but it's like, it's not really that surprising, I guess, just because the space is so dynamic. Things move quick, and you know, it's just like, you got to be, you know, observant of that fact, because you know, that's one thing about this place. It's like, you know, you pick an oracle and then you watch it for too long, next thing you know, you're falling down the wrong route. So just definitely think for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, it's in no way like just the fact that he is making statements in contradiction to statements I make. Like, I've actually, and a lot of other people were involved, done 2 talks with him in depth that we published on this channel. But, and you know, in the Mumble server that we run, like, there's an insane variance in views on things. Like, there's literally everything from people more hardcore libertarians, such as myself and JW, to people who literally think that Bitcoin is something that should be used by the central banks. And I mean, it's, if you are honestly arguing from a rational, intellectually honest point of view, I would love to actually engage with people. But it's when people cross the line of engaging in a logical manner, in an intellectually consistent and honest manner, that it really bothers me. Like, a diversity of views and opinions is a great thing when they are rooted in actual logic and observation of things. But when people start constructing narratives with a presupposed conclusion and then rationalize towards that, that's not honest. That's not logical.
Yeah, I was just saying in the chat window, like, it seems like the simplest explanation for a lot of this behavior is that these guys are getting paid. And I know everybody's like, oh, I don't want to say that, you know, and when I say that about like Krawitz, everybody's like, no, he's an early Bitcoiner. But look, if Andreas Antonopoulos can be in some circumstances over the last few years that results in him not having a lot of Bitcoin, so can these guys, right? And it's not easy to make money as an entrepreneur. This is a very competitive sort of space. You know, ShapeShift, you know, they seemed like they had a good idea about 1.5 years ago, and now it just looks ridiculous, right? Like, none of us would want to invest in that. And you see that again and again and again. So I think it's very possible that Roger's just throwing these guys a few bucks, and they're, you know, they're probably in a position where they're frustrated. I mean, if I was day trading for the last 2 years, I would probably be ready to take some money from Roger too. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always part of my conspiratorial thought. It's like, you know, these guys, they know better. They're just saying it because they're getting a paycheck.
Yeah, but you know, it's an obvious marker of, you know, being a very wealthy person, constantly showing out referral links. Like, that's the ultimate sign.
Ouch. Yeah, I mean, if you know, you got to do what you got to do to stay in candlesticks. Those things aren't cheap.
I mean, I think a lot of people in this space would benefit a lot more from investing in showers rather than fancy looking shirts, but that's just me.
Ouch. There is some greasy hair going around. I'll give you that.
Maybe they're trying this new thing I'm trying, man. It's a new thing. No shampoo. This is a week. No shampoo. I don't know. I'm a weirdo there.
Yeah, and so Shinobi, when you were talking about like the spectrum of people that we get in chat rooms, like, I've also noticed that. I'm like so glad that we haven't gotten to the point of some other chat rooms where there are people who literally self-identify as like crypto fascists. That's apparently the end of the spectrum is crypto fascist.
I mean, it's like, I really don't care what your view on things are. if you are arriving at them through actual reasoned logic from a set of self-consistent axioms. Like, I might disagree with those axioms. I might attack them. I might try to show some kind of contradiction or inconsistency in it. But if you are coming from a point of view of self-consistent axioms and actually arriving to a conclusion through reason, I am all for discussing things with you, debating things with you. But when people set out to just sell a narrative that is not arrived at that way, they're not going to engage genuinely. They're not going to be intellectually honest. And it becomes a game of rhetoric. It becomes who can, like, it's like the political campaigns. I mean, like, I kind of half dox myself. I've already done a few times. I live in Illinois. And when I go on YouTube, I consistently see these political campaigns against Bruce Rauner. I don't even know who the hell the competitor is, but it's literally just, Bruce Rauner says that he's not in charge. I'll be in charge if you elect me. That's a completely, like, logically vacuous statement. There is no actual anything communicated there. It's just something that hits an emotional chord. And when you have baseless rhetoric like that does not actually root itself in logic, then you're not engaging anybody. You're playing a popularity contest, and that is not a genuine way to actually arrive at a logical conclusion or insight into something.
Well said. Yeah, because I've definitely had amazing arguments with people just because they noticed something different about their life experience than I did, and that's where it's like those debates they're really helpful towards ideas in general. But if you're like coming from this idea of like you're spun up a narrative to create this debate, and then it's pointless and it's not really doing anything that's helpful except bring light to your subject.
Yeah, just selling snake oil is, I think, what most of it is. I agree.
All right, I guess we done with the unplanned topic, I guess. Move on to the next one.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I have one more question before we go into the next topic. Do you think that Martin Luther would be a small blocker or a big blocker?
Who cares? He's dead.
Oh, gosh. He was rational, so I think he would probably not have an opinion until he became a software security expert.
Yeah, I think small blocker.
All right. Well, somebody else who would take that stance, it seems, is Microsoft. This is a blog post from their identity division. For those of you who don't know, Microsoft has, for more than a year, to my understanding, actually been doing a lot of in-depth research into decentralized identity and how to actually make that work and integrate that into the internet as we know it today. And so this is an interesting read. I think everybody should go through. They kind of break down a little bit of the dynamics of how it would technically work. Like, I would obviously have to rely on some kind of web of trust dynamic where people are actually attesting for different identities for whatever purpose that would be for. And then an ability to kind of have that stored in a encrypted way so that your actual personal information is not just thrown to the winds of the internet, and you have a more modular ability to manage things. But one of the most important statements in this, I think, is their statement regarding scaling. Like, they pretty much said that it is completely untenable to just try to scale everything up on the blockchain itself and actually hit a global level of traffic without completely destroying the level of decentralization that makes these kind of systems actually functional and valuable. And they're specifically going to collaborate with all of the other companies that they've set up. I believe it's called the Decentralized Identity Foundation, to build second layer solutions to actually help these systems scale and be that root anchor that they can attach a decentralized identity system to. Because obviously, like, if you're trying to build an identity system that's decentralized and you don't have a decentralized foundation to peg it into, it's not really going to work. It's going to just devolve into the same kind of gatekeeper, centralized, like hacking targets that we have now. And I mean, I don't think I have to spell out that identity theft is becoming more and more common.
Yeah, can I just quickly point out, I find this so hilarious where it says accessible to everyone. The blockchain ecosystem today is still mostly early adopters who are willing to spend time, effort, and energy managing keys and securing devices. This is not something we can expect mainstream people to deal with. We need to make key management challenges such as recovery, rotation, secure access, intuitive, and foolproof. I find that statement coming from Microsoft, who is responsible for building some of the most insecure and not privacy preserving devices in the entire ecosystem. Like, when did Microsoft shift from we're the creators of Windows to let's have privacy in a blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like
this is their fault. This is all of this that the reason that it's hard for mainstream people to have secure devices, that's pretty much their fault, because everyone using Windows has to do a ton of extra work to even level up security with that system. So,
and it's kind of like, I'm personally like shocked that I'm actually sitting here and looking at Microsoft and going, good job. Like you are actually arriving at a logical conclusion. Like I ditched Windows years ago when they started putting ads literally on your desktop. Like that was the final straw for me. Not even getting into the whole fiasco of Windows 10 and the amount of data that it's actually phoning home. And I really do think slowly and surely, like, these companies are realizing the systemic consequences of how they structure their products. I mean, like, we've seen Apple recently open source at least the kernel of their operating system. Microsoft is moving in that direction, is actually recently, I think sometime through the second half of last year, integrated the Ubuntu shell into Windows for developers. And I think they're slowly starting to realize that they have to fundamentally change the way that they're building their products to actually be sustainable companies. And just to see the way, I mean, just to see a company like Microsoft actually appreciate that the fundamental problem with adopting cryptographic technologies is the fact that key management is so easy to fuck up and so hard for non-technical people to wrap their heads around. Like, I really do think we're starting to see the first waves of huge attitude shifts in the technology space. And I mean, just the fact that this company is pretty much spearheading an attempt to redo the way that identity is handled in a more privacy-centric, more security-centric way. Like, it's, yeah, I mean, there's still the fucking miles of baggage and bullshit behind them, but they're starting to try to steer the ship in a better direction.
Yeah, I was also really surprised to hear, like, I don't know, the way that they talked about it, like understanding that, you know, this requires, you know, a little bit of maintaining this decentralization, like, you know, and the fact that they don't quite understand exactly how it's going to work just yet, but, you know, that it's going to take some testing and experimentation. And, you know, that's where I think they've got a whole group put together, like different companies working on this. And I think IBM and IOTA and Civic are in there, and quite a few others. And I don't know, this is where we were discussing earlier, like the whole ASIC manufacturing and Intel and all them, like, do they have, you know, guys in the background that are working on this sort of stuff and not just ignoring it? Like, this is like some sort of positive reinforcement that they're not just ignoring it, and they do at least have some sort of realistic grasp as to what's being trying to achieve here, like what we're trying to achieve, and whether or not they are going to be a part of that and how exactly to do it. So it's good to see that they understand that they don't understand everything about it, and that it's going to take, you know, some work on side chains, and, you know, getting this whole process as far as like pegging these side chains to the Bitcoin network in order to build these identity platforms. Like, because yeah, I don't know, the whole thing is still pretty confusing to me. I mean, like, I like the idea of like having a secured identity, but how it'll be done, I don't know. That's why I don't know. I like the idea that there are some working groups within these major companies that are paying attention to this and trying to figure it out. So hopefully they'll do something where, yeah, it won't, I don't know, lead to the same problems of the past, which I don't think so. It sounds like they're serious about it, because if they want to be included in it, then yeah, we've got to sort of take a step outside of the way things that have been done.
Yeah, I thought it was mostly a positive article until I got to the word biometrics. And the word identity is kind of one of those words like equality. Like, oh, do you mean you're going to let me apply for a job even though I'm black? Or do you mean that you're going to take all my stuff and we're all going to starve to death, right? So when people say identity, if what they mean is like a reusable identity where like I sign up for your service and I have an identity and I pay money for that identity, you know, like a handle that I'm using on Xbox or something like that, all good, you know, great. Yep. Let's put that, you know, there's ways to do that with Bitcoin where everything's more secure and easier to deal with. Awesome. But when you start talking about biometrics, then they've moved over into the dark side where what they're talking about is basically putting a tag in your ear, right? Like you're an animal with a serial number on it, and actually putting your physical body right on the blockchain. That's no good. We definitely don't want that. We don't want to be bagged and tagged and tracked any more efficiently than we are already. And I hope that Microsoft focuses on the good side of identity, you know, which are reusable reputations, disposable reputations, and not trying to get, you know, a copy of my retina and make sure that I can only you know, buy food if I'm on an approved list or something. And that's really, I mean, it's going to go hard one way or hard the other way. I hope those guys get it straight before they make too much progress.
Yeah, part of me wants to say, like, you know, if they're coming to an understanding of this, maybe they understand that like privacy is also pretty important in this. So I'm hopeful, but yeah, that's pretty scary to think that, you know, your biometrics are going to be locked down. So I don't know, either which way. The identity program stuff is like, yeah, I don't know. It's got something I haven't put too much thought in. I mean, like, it seems like it would be more secure for like current way passwords are set up and stuff like that, or like just like entry into a system. But as far as your actual identity, I don't know. I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know. This fever's catching back up to me. I'm kind of losing my place.
It's all right, man. Just between now and the time that you recover from that fever, don't swing by the Microsoft store and give them a blood sample, please. As long as you don't do that, you'll be all right when it's all over.
All right, I'll make that note.
I think Shinobi is being distracted by the troll box here. I think it's time for the next one.
I don't get distracted by trolls at all. At all. Not one bit. Not one bit whatsoever. Alrighty. And here is just a little old bit of news I think is worth mentioning again. So when are we going to hear a status update from eBay seriously considering accepting Bitcoin? I mean, it's been, what, 2 months now? We've seen Square Cash actually roll out the proper version minus accepting deposits. So what's going on here? When are we're seeing a big company like Microsoft look to this space for an anchor for digital identities. We're starting to see like a lot more interest in institutional investors. So when are we going to kind of round that out and see more development on the actual commerce side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I put this story in the news desk because I looked through the stories, and I saw this story come up again recently, and I don't remember us covering it on the show. Do you guys know if we did?
No, I don't remember covering this.
I don't either. Yeah, I don't think we covered it. So it is interesting that they were talking about being serious about it. And it sounds like they haven't really done anything in 2 months, but we're talking about eBay. So, you know, I wouldn't expect any changes from the time they think they should do it for what, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, something along those lines.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about like really all this talk about other companies and online retailers accepting it was with that price rise and Overstock's, you know, stock price. We're going through the roof with the Bitcoin price and the way that has an effect on the company overall. So I don't know, maybe we'll start to see seriousness about it, like once this like little what bear trend we're in jumps back in a bull. Like I don't know, like once the numbers start going up, then they'll have all their systems in place for this. I don't know, but I think that eBay's ripe for it, man. They like have all this crypto stuff on there already. Like, you know, you buy those old mining rigs and t-shirts and all kinds of crap for crypto. So it makes sense, like with the stock price thing too. So, I mean, like it could be a lot sooner than we think.
It is.
Well, I mean, I don't see.
I mean, it's a good reminder that they couldn't do this without Lightning, right? Because they would have too many transactions to be able to make this work. But
I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, it would obviously you would have to be more custodial in terms of security models, but I mean, like, why not top off I don't see a problem with it for small reasons. I mean, I use Coinbase and a Shift card almost on a daily basis. And yes, I do have to trust them for the small amounts that I put there, but I've never had any serious problems.
No, I don't look at a company. I mean, like eBay. If I was the CSO of eBay, I would freaking quit before I let them take custody of people's Bitcoin. Especially if, you know, it's just like, look, wait another 4 months and let's have another meeting because it looks like Lightning is making progress.
Well, but see, that's another side of the thing is like it doesn't have to be as simple as we just take it as payments. I mean, look at a company like Purse.io. Like I have a lot of problems with like the actual members of the company, but they've done pretty well for themselves in kind of thinking a little outside of the box. Like they have the consumer facing side of things where you just, you know, I'm buying things on Amazon from Bitcoin or using Bitcoin. And on the other side of that, like they're pretty much an exchange. Like they're a place you can go to buy Bitcoin. So if like, hey, I go to spend Bitcoin, there's somebody on the other side of that actually buying. And I mean, it's kind of turned itself into a dual like place for people to engage in commerce with Bitcoin, but also an on-ramp for people to acquire Bitcoin. And I mean, they kind of tackled that problem in a workable way by just stepping back from the just using it to pay for things. And how do we kind of reconcile these two different sides of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Obviously, the senders of the Bitcoin are the ones that assume the fees anyway, and so, you know, there's no reason why they couldn't accept Bitcoin. But on the other hand, I think it's good to just remember where we're at. And if you are a large merchant, you know, you're Amazon, you're eBay, and you want to be able to have, you want to easily be able to accept Bitcoin, there's still kind of, as of right now, I think there's still two major barriers. One is that people don't want to part with their Bitcoin because adoption is still ongoing, right? The world hasn't fully adopted Bitcoin, so the value keeps going up and people generally don't want to spend it as a result. And I think that we kind of forget about that and underestimate that. But then the other thing is that you have to be able to easily do transactions without adding a lot of other crap on top of it, right? Like hats off to Purse for figuring out kind of a creative solution. But if I'm at Amazon, I don't want to figure out a creative solution with my payment provider, right? I just want to accept payments and send out the freaking tchotchkes. So I think those two things are still kind of a big factor. But yeah, with Lightning, one of them is going away pretty rapidly. So that's cool.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, can I use this as an opportunity to make another crack at DeRosa's Zurich talk? Like, I don't really have a choice when it comes to spending Bitcoin, JW. Like, I'm all in. Like, if I need to buy something, I need to buy something, and I have Bitcoin. So I mean, I do get you that most people aren't really spending their Bitcoin, but the chunk of users that are, like, it's not some ideological thing. It's not virtue signaling. Like, look at me spending Bitcoin. It's I have to. That's my money. Or it's somebody deciding, hey, I'm going to take some profit from my investment in this way by spending this instead of dollars I have. Like, people actually are using it for the utility it provides as money. It's not just people buying and holding it because the value is going to keep going. Like, people are using it because they have to use it, or they're using it because, hey, I can realize some profits in this way. And I mean, it's a small
segment. That's true, but it's a niche, man. I mean, it's still a small number of people that own, like I own a little bit of Bitcoin. I don't really want to spend it. Right. And I think that's I'm not saying I have data on this, right? But I'm guessing, because, and maybe I'm just projecting myself, but I'm guessing that most people, and when you hear people talk about it, they always say, oh, you can spend it, but then you immediately buy it back. I don't know, man. I mean, unless there's some reason for me to do that, I'm not really going to go through that hassle, right? I mean, if you're going to give me a discount because you're not having to deal with credit card fraud and all that, cool. But I think because of the hassle of supporting a payment method that has a niche group of people, they're not going to offer discounts anytime soon for that. So I think most people are not going to be spending their Bitcoin until the price of Bitcoin flattens out. But that's just my working theory.
Well, I mean, like, I can kind of say, like, just like the way that, you know, I manage Bitcoin, it's like, you know, I'm still accumulating a little bit, and like, you know, I'm pretty much every little bit I can go in, I go in, and like there is those moments where it's like, okay, I've run out of fiat, and so yeah, I do have to spend my Bitcoin, and like, I don't know, it's like it's one of those things where it's not always like I'm out of my fiat too. Sometimes it's just like timing wise, it's like, well, the price is up right now and it looks like it might go back down. So if I spend this like little bit that's earned a little bit of profit on this side, it's like a very, I don't know, it's a weighted thing. I don't really have like this stockpile here and I use this pile. It's like I kind of have to manage between the two. And so I don't know. I think people are going to still spend Bitcoin, but I mean, like, it is kind of aggravating when it's like, you know, yeah, I spent, you know, so many Bitcoins on a bike that's now worth like $60,000 because of the amount of Bitcoins I spent on it. You know, it's like, it can be aggravating, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. You have to manage getting through life. And if you need to get through life by spending Bitcoin, then spend it. Don't just hold it.
Yeah, totally. I would just put a plug for the privacy thing. I would try to separate out two piles, put a pile, even if it's like, you know, a third of a Bitcoin or an eighth of a Bitcoin or whatever, put that in your long-term holdings. And then whatever you have that, you know, that you can't reasonably set aside for 5 years, use that for buying and selling, but consider that kind of your dirty, tainted, they can probably track your identity sort of purse.
Yeah, I've actually just picked up on that not too long ago. You know, it's like, yeah, I mean, like I do have my standard wallet that I move funds to back and forth from Coinbase for the Shift card, but like now I'm starting to set up like other, you know, wallets to where those are sort of different from where like donations come in and stuff like that. Just so there's like a difference from like if a donation comes in from someone, it's not tied to my KYC or something like that. It's one of those things I'm figuring out over time. But as far as like spending Bitcoin goes, I think a lot of these new users that are coming on, they're going to be doing something similar where it's like they're investing like, you know, basically like not everything, but it's like kind of what they have as far as like savings. And if they fall on hard times, they might be spending that Bitcoin. So, I mean, we might see a lot of these more like new users that are coming online that are using Bitcoin in that sort of way, actually spending their Bitcoin, you know, out of necessity.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I'm also assuming that they would probably sell it, right? They'd go out to Coinbase or whatever and then sell it and then put that in their account. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for it, right? Like I'm not trying to say that I don't encourage people to spend Bitcoin. I think it's good for the network, you know, more transaction fees, secure all of our transactions back in the past. So it's all positive. And I don't have any problem with people saying, hey, spend it and then refill it, right? That's a great strategy too. I just know if it's a hassle, most people won't do it. And I suspect that, you know, that there's probably not a whole lot of demand to buy stuff on eBay with Bitcoin right now, but I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And I guess a surprise tweet somebody pinged me with. I guess I'm gonna have to go listen to Eric Voorhees on Unchained podcast, but he's apparently, I guess if this is correct, claiming BitPay is going to try to move all Bitcoin related payments to Bitcoin Cash. Eric, if you're listening, you are literally retarded. How does that work for people who only have Bitcoin? Like what magic innovation do you have that's going to allow them to just whisk that away into Bitcoin Cash without fees or extra friction? Like what are you doing here? Like if your customers have one thing, how do you switch payments over to another thing? Like all you can do is stop accepting payments for Bitcoin and only accept them for Bitcoin Cash. And I expect you'll see a huge drop in your fucking customers if that happens. But so I like what the hell is the logic here? Is there some magic transmutation to turn Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash with no fees or wait time?
So the trend here is that it's always a business that seems really stupid for where we're at in Bitcoin adoption that's doing this stuff, right? Like we're not talking about usually a business that really makes sense right now. I mean, Coinbase seems to really suck, so I guess they're an exception to the rule. But there's certain things at this phase of adoption that are really smart, good businesses, right? And there's not very many of them because we're in basically the hoarding or the saving phase of something becoming money. So it's pretty much getting into Bitcoin and getting out of Bitcoin is where it's at right now. And these guys that think that Bitcoin is going to be a retail solution, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, when we didn't have Lightning, they were completely mistiming the market, right? It was completely absurd. Like I can't tell you for sure that eBay doesn't have a lot of demand for people buying stuff with Bitcoin now, but I guarantee you they didn't 2 years ago or whatever it was that these guys fired up their business. So they're incompetent entrepreneurs. They don't know how to time the market. They don't know what a technology curve looks like and when to get in on it. And they're just flailing. And they're selling out like crazy because they're not willing to pivot and actually build something useful, or scale back expenses and wait for the timing to be right. So instead, they're just selling out and doing just one retarded thing after another.
Yeah, but like you get my point though. Like, how do you just switch over to Bitcoin Cash?
No,
like,
I don't even think they are.
Like your customers have to. Your customers would have to decide to stop holding and using Bitcoin and use Bitcoin Cash instead.
Like if you said this, my guess is he just said it, right? Like I don't even give this guy credit to the point of that he's actually written any code or he's implementing anything. I think he's just simply shilling Bcash in a way that kind of matches his business and gives him some credibility in doing it, right? Maybe a few suckers went out and bought Bcash because of what he said, and he got a few bucks from Roger. That would be my guess. I wouldn't expect it was more than that, but that's enough to you just suck. Like you're just terrible, and it's too bad you won't do the work to be good, but see you at the poorhouse.
Yeah, this is God, sorry man, it's like I just had a thought but I just lost it. I'm sorry.
That's all right, man. This is Sudafed talking.
Yeah, right.
Just say how much you hate him.
Okay, like it's like it's just like we were talking about earlier with the Segwit2x guys and like the Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin Cash argument. It's like it's the same group of guys, right? It's the same actors. Like ShapeShift was a part of Segwit2x. I'm nearly certain. I'm not.
Oh yeah, they were.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So yeah, it's just like we're saying. I mean, it's kind of like the same story, just like same guys, different story, trying to spin it a different way. I mean, like, yeah, it's like you're saying though, it's always coming from businesses in the space that aren't really that smart as far as like what we're trying to do here and everything. But I don't know. This argument probably be playing out for a better part of 2018 now. I don't, as far as like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Core, and all these different ways to try and confuse the argument as much as possible for as long as possible. It just feels like that. But yeah, as far as getting BitPay users to just switch over, I'd have to go back and listen to that podcast, but that doesn't just sound right.
Yeah, my reaction personally is if they were to do something like that, you lost a customer, morons. Have fun. And a last little note on this is I was literally just talking to somebody who's trying to buy something through BitPay. And they've even apparently found a way to fuck up the payment protocol because this person literally cycled through all the compatible wallets with the payment protocol and it wasn't recognizing the BitPay QR code. Only Bitcoin Core would, and the payment window would have timed out before he could actually transfer funds to that wallet or import a key and have it rescan everything. So congratulations, BitPay. You are fast on the way to making yourself irrelevant.
Software is hard. Shilling crap coins is easy.
Mm-hmm. And I guess next up, Jeanine, you want to take it away on this? This is actually pretty cool news from Salon.com.
Yeah, they've apparently decided to, when you go to their website, if you have an ad blocker enabled, Shinobi, if you want to test it out to see if it works with AdBlock Plus. Yep, it does. So if you go to their website now, even if you just click on an article, this is just their main homepage, but if you click on an article, it'll also pop up. And if you have an ad blocker installed, you'll get this little message saying that you have the choice between allowing ads normally, or you can try their, I don't know if it must be some kind of app that they're running in the background. It's like a beta app to mine Monero in the background instead of having ads. And if you click on learn more, that will take you to this FAQ. Yeah, same, it's on that one, yep. It'll take you to this FAQ page, which kind of explains why they've pivoted to mining cryptocurrencies, especially when that's been in the news. Like we reported on the last show, apparently a lot of government websites are making you mine cryptocurrencies by accident because something with the third-party providers that they're connected to, they are not secure, and so they're getting taken advantage of in that way. Government can't really do security well, as you can see. But they kind of give this little blurb about the history of advertising on the web, because you always have to do this, and they have to explain why they're not making money. And then further down, it kind of talks about the implications for people who might not know what happens when you have a cryptocurrency being mined in the background. And basically the implication is that your computer will be using a lot more resources, and so everything is going to slow down, just like when you have ads. The only difference is that I assume you're not going to have to deal with annoying ads and probably all of the surveillance, advertising surveillance that comes with that. I hope that they are keeping that out of the cryptocurrency mining model, that there's no longer any trackers, because I think that would be, at least to me, that would be a clear advantage in terms of whether I would choose to enable this or just block ads as I usually do. But yeah, it looks like they're going to be using Monero, automatically detecting process usage and starting it up. And if you don't want to have that happen, you can just go with ads, I guess. I don't know what happens if you say that you'll take ads, but your ad blocker is still working. I haven't tested it. What I do find funny, I think there was something at the very bottom of this page. Yeah, so they says they don't access any of your personal information. Okay, maybe it wasn't on this page, but someone was pointing out today that Salon has previously published an article saying that cryptocurrencies were enabling the neo-Nazi right. So I'm kind of wondering whether this is some kind of signal, or if they're like, oh, actually,
it's a canary. They've been taken over by the neo-Nazi right.
So I'm kind of wondering if they've now backtracked on that, or if this is some kind of statement. Can't really tell. But
that must have been the 2016 election, just like anything towards the right was Nazi or something.
Well, I mean, to be honest, Salon, as far as I know, is not. Exactly. It's not exactly known for being one of the bastions of good journalism. But whatever, it's an experiment, so let's just explore it when we get the chance. So this was a topic of debate today that I saw on Twitter, and people were saying whether this was the right thing to do or not. And my perspective on it, from when we started hearing about this, is basically that as long as a website is being transparent about it, and they're giving users a choice and making users aware that this is happening, I don't really have a problem with it, because as far as I'm aware, it's from as far as I can see, it's a far more ethical way of getting revenue than surveilling your users and tying yourself into this whole spammy advertising system, which I hope will die soon. Probably it will take a lot longer, than just getting partially replaced by sites that.
Hey, what the hell?
Oh my god.
I do shampoo my hair for the record.
That's what I was gonna say. Your hair looks all nice and clean.
Who made that GIF?
But Han Solo does not blow dry my hair.
Need to get a Han Solo blow dryer.
Well, the last time that I saw the Star Wars meme with all of the Bitcoin people in it, I believe Peter Todd is Han Solo. So apparently that's Peter Todd hair blood.
I'm not a she Wookie.
So what do you guys think about more websites doing this and being transparent about it?
I think that's a very positive thing. I mean, especially like they explicitly said here, CoinHive allows you to actually fine tune the percentage of your machine's resources that it's using. So that can be kind of tailored so it's not wrecking everything else you're trying to do on your machine. But I think I'm very positive about this. Like, I think this is a nice avenue of things to explore as an alternative to ads. And I'm actually really impressed with the way they kind of structured the FAQ down to like my computer's making noise. Why? Like they've really kind of thought this through, I think, to the lowest common denominators so that they can kind of assuage any doubts or concerns to even very non-technical people.
Right. Like, that's where, I mean, like, I'm with y'all both on this. It's just like the advertising model is just not a good one. It's something that hasn't really produced any kind of, I don't know. It's just like, it's one of those things where, like, are the advertisings really getting to the consumers? Because, like, a lot of people use ad blockers or skip the ad, or it just seems pretty pointless. So a lot of times, like, yeah, you're looking for other ways to find revenue, and like this, web mining thing that Monero has been doing has definitely been something where, it's like a place where you could get revenue, and it's, legitimate. And, if you could get the system working, functioning to where, your customers know that they're being included in this, and like there's a reason for it, and, you won't have advertisements on your site now for it. And I think it's interesting. I'd like to see where it progresses. I think that, this is like we were saying earlier about Monero, and like they're changing proof of work to ensure, staying away from ASICs. Like, I think this is a pretty important part of that. If you want like, a web miner being used from industries as a place for revenue, so it's interesting. I'd like to see it, like to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's really cool as well. It does kind of remind me of the stuff that happened, like, I don't know, more and more of these like .com analogies back in like, 2000 keep coming to mind. But it reminds me of like when industries started getting excited about the internet, and they were like, oh, we got to register domain names, right? And they were just going and registering domain names and buying domain names, and like, that was all they could see. They didn't understand like, well, we're gonna have to write some software, and actually we're gonna have to solve some problems that people actually have. It was just like, oh, just domain names. So I think it kind of reminds me of that, because instead of these guys going, oh, Lightning, micropayments, Bitcoin, like we can do this, we can completely rebuild our sort of business based on micropayments, and all of the work has been done for us. Instead, they're like, well, we could just turn our customers into miners, right? And they could be like really inefficient, shitty miners and give us the fruits of their labor. They're going to spend more on electricity than we're going to actually get in value. But it's, they're on the path. It's a really kind of dumb version of this, of what it should be, but they're headed in that direction. So give them a couple more years and they'll be accepting Lightning payments, I think. And that's awesome. And even in this dumb path, it's better than what they've been doing so far, because yeah, the advertising based model has definitely created a very ugly world. And if it continues, we'll be lucky if we have any scraps of privacy left.
Yeah, and I would definitely compare. I would definitely be in favor of using something like Monero to do this rather than a completely KYC'd lockdown system like Brave did with the BAT. I mean, like, I think it's kind of sending a signal, the fact that Salon didn't, jump into the Brave publishing model, because I mean, if I had an option to choose a currency that I could use, I could get the thing is also anyone can do this. Like Salon is doing it, but anyone can just set up a website and have the same code running in the background whenever people visit their site. Like, this is completely open. You can do this completely anonymously. Like, there's no KYC involved. It's much better to me than the BAT is.
Yeah, totally. No, that's a good point. It is definitely better than that.
Yeah, and all of it's better than advertising and a bunch of billboards.
Yeah, I mean, the only downside I think I could see of this is, like, obviously there are still privacy, or not privacy, but security implications of, websites being able to, like, hijack your CPU. I mean, I think that's still something that needs to be considered. Like, do we really want to have devices that allow that to happen so easily and completely out of users' control? Like, I think that's something we should consider, but that's like a general problem with the entire web. And I think that, there's still a way. Obviously, that would making that aspect of it opt-in as well. It would still completely fit with this if these websites are going to be transparent about the fact that they're doing it anyway.
I mean, like, it's stuff like this is why I think Monero is one of the few altcoins out there that is not a complete scam. Like, they decided to take an entirely different path from Bitcoin and go for privacy and fungibility first, and then start streamlining and making things more efficient. And kind of the direction they've taken the entire proof of work model, like, you can do things like this. I mean, like, it really does offer options for, like, different uses that are just not possible with Bitcoin. Like, it really does provide new use cases and new utilities that are not just trivially, like, clonable over to Bitcoin. And it's, like, almost, like, I seriously struggle right now to think of an alternative project out there that really does that.
Yeah, it's also interesting to think that they probably run some numbers. They think that this is going to be more profitable than their ad model, right? Or they wouldn't bother to do the experiment. So with all of the inefficiency involved, right? You're not even GPU mining. I don't know much about Monero as far as how its mining goes, but I assume that GPUs are in play. If that's the case, you're using some really inefficient mining. You're handing it off to those guys, the results. It's for a really short period of time. It's with, it's for CPUs. Okay. So GPUs aren't
CPUs, but it's kind of the way the
expensive electricity, right? Most people that are accessing salon.com, they're not doing it, from hydropower or whatever, right? So there's all kinds of inefficiencies in this process, and they still believe it's going to be profitable for them to do it. So imagine how profitable it would be if it was just Lightning micropayments, right? 4 or 5, 10 times their current revenue, I think would probably be a very reasonable guess.
I mean, it's just new like, genuinely new possibilities that are not something you can just drop into Bitcoin. Like, we can't just roll back mining difficulty to make things like this actually profitable in terms of replacing ads. I mean, we can kind of do, like, micropayment solutions with something like Lightning Network, but that's kind of attacking it from a different problem. It's actually charging you money that you have instead of allowing you to repurpose resources that you have. And so it's kind of cool to see some things out there that aren't complete scams when you actually wade through the sea of shit. But yeah. You ready to break the bad news, Janine?
Uh-oh.
Oh no, the GCHQ got her.
I think.
Janine?
Wait, what? I went to get a drink of water.
Well,
what was the question?
That is shameful. You're supposed to be hanging on every word, every syllable that comes out of our mouth the whole show.
Time to break the bad news.
And it's not GCHQ anymore, guys. I'm not in that country.
I'm trying to locational coverage.
The Luftwaffe.
What? That's the Air Force.
Blitzkrieg.
That's an organization. That's like a style of attack.
Sauerkraut.
You just thinking of all the German words, you know.
I took like 6 months in high school. I remember some good stuff from that.
I took 2 years of German. I can barely remember how to form a sentence.
I took like more than that, and I'm a German, and I'm still terrible.
It's like all language. It's all about the attitude. Like, das ist nicht gut. Just get really angry.
Okay, all right.
I think you're right.
Apparently, the one German word that everyone knows is 9.
That's true. 9, yeah.
I know how to count.
That means blackhead.
Okay.
We had a general blackhead that was involved in the Iraq War 1, so I thought that was funny.
Okay, I would have thought that the word for blackhead would be Schwarzkopf.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Schwarzkopf. Didn't you hear?
No, because Germans don't talk like that generally.
All right. Now that our viewers are
because they're very aware that using their language in combination with an aggressive tone is scary to people.
All right. Now that our viewers are fluent speakers in German, are we ready for the next story?
Well, yeah, before we get on to the next topic, actually, I heard from an actual German person that because now blockchain has been adopted into one of the anglicized words that Germans use, but actually there is actually a real German word for blockchain, and I can't remember it right now, but it's something like certificate chain. So I have to remember that for next time. I'll have to share that.
That is silly. But got some bad news for Julian Assange fans. You want to take the ball, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, I thought there was definitely. I didn't know anything about the judge. If I had known anything about the judge, then I'd probably been like, "Oh, there's no way this is going to happen," because it turns out the judge is a real asshole. Yeah, so he lost. Basically, he filed an appeal. I think it was an appeal that said that he should be released on public interest grounds. And I believe some of the points, if you document the Assange, right? I think some of the points are mentioned. This might just be her reply, but I remember some of the points. Obviously, because the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention 2 years ago, literally of this month, because I believe it was February 6th, when Chris and I filmed at the Ecuadorian embassy. And that was when he made a speech about the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which had determined that he was being arbitrarily detained. And that was a human rights violation in the UK. And the UK has ignored that now for 2 years. And so this appeal was made on the grounds that the UK should be listening to that UN determination, and that they should drop the arrest warrant, not only because the UN determined that he was under arbitrary detention, but because since then, Sweden has actually dropped the case. They are no longer pursuing him in any capacity. And the only reason that Assange became trapped in the UK in the first place was because he went to the UK, and then Sweden basically put a warrant out for his arrest for no reason, because he had already been called into the police office. He voluntarily went there. He was interviewed at the Stockholm police station, and they let him go. And then he left the country, and then they put out another arrest warrant for some reason, no idea, because they reopened the case. And so then he was in the UK, and the UK was like, okay, we're going to extradite him. And so then he was under house arrest while he was trying to avoid being extradited to Sweden. And the whole reason there was an arrest warrant for him in the UK was because when the UK courts determined that they were going to extradite him back to Sweden, then he got political asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy. So the whole reason that he's even in the UK and had these bail conditions was because of the Swedish case. So the Swedish case is now gone. There's not really a reason to pursue him anymore. And even if there was, he's been contained in this embassy, which, as I said before, is like basically one room and like a front office, his bedroom, probably a bathroom somewhere. And something about there was a gym, but I'm not sure, in the basement. Basically a very small space, hasn't really been able to go outside except for when he does speeches on the balcony, because if he does, there is like literally people who have a reason to harm him. And so if I was him, I wouldn't want to be standing out in the air with that many people standing around for any length of time. And so obviously he's had deprivation of sunlight and all kinds of things. So basically that was the reasons that they gave for saying that the arrest warrant should be dropped. And the judge made this very strange decision where she basically said she didn't think it was worth it to listen to the UN determination, that it was worthless, and that they were being like overly dramatic or something. And yeah, so basically the next 3 months or so, Assange can appeal this decision. So it's not over yet. It was just one rejection. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, it's super disappointing to see like this, just because, you know, I think most of us in crypto could understand, like, you know, the value of the truth here, and like some of the things that, you know, that's like why he's got so much pressure on him, is because he's like got this truth machine WikiLeaks out there, and they don't like it. And like I saw a tweet on there. It's like, it's really aggravating to see, you know, people like this and Edward Snowden, who's like trapped in Russia, basically like portrayed as like, oh, well, he's a Russian spy, that's why he's there. Where it's like, no, he's like legally caught there. And, you know, he's like kind of legally trapped there. And it's just, it's aggravating to see that. At the same time, you see Hillary Clinton. I did not see this, but I heard she was at the freaking Golden Globes or some Emmys or some crap just the other night. And like, of course, LA and just like lost their crap for her because she's Hillary Clinton. And it's like, you know, all these like tyrants of the freaking world are still just running around, no problem. In fact, causing all this trouble for guys like Julian Assange. It's really upsetting. I don't know when we'll actually see that guy be able to walk free, but hopefully it'll be soon. Same time as Albrecht, same time as Snowden. I don't know when we're going to get these courts that are going to be helpful in this situation, but we need it. I mean, it's really upsetting to see the reality as far as like what is good and negative, and, you know, that play out in the courts just the total wrong way, and like what all signals that sends to society. It's upsetting.
Yeah, and Shinobi, if you go to, there was a tweet thread that I think I included from someone who actually has legal experience, and she was explaining why, she was explaining in this thread why she disagrees with the chief magistrate's decision to ignore the working group on arbitrary detention's decision. And apparently the most important point was the difference between whether there's a deprivation of liberty or a like voluntarily chosen self-confinement. And so this magistrate judge was basically saying that he chose to confine himself within the Ecuadorian embassy and that he could leave at any time, which makes no sense, obviously, because as she explains in this thread, if exercising your liberty results in coercive, if exercising your liberty, such as going outside of the Ecuadorian embassy property, results in coercive activities being used against you, then clearly that is not a situation where you are able to freely express your liberty. And so that was one of the arguments that the judge gave. And she was saying something like, Assange is a person who thinks himself above the law, which I thought really interesting because the UN made a determination that the UK was violating his human rights, and according to the fact that the UK is part of the UN and agreed to follow UN determinations like that, I feel like the UK thinks that it's above international law. So I don't see how it's in a place to make judgments like that when it itself is not willing to submit to international law and courts.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's like why we need WikiLeaks and stuff is to show that there is no rule of law anymore. Like your rule of law, you're not following it. There's no fucking, sorry. Like there's no such, like that rule of measurement as far as what's right and wrong is totally skewed. And it's like things like WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden that are able to show us like just how skewed it is. And I mean, like, and they're pissed about that. And like, that's why they're doing this. And, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that fever's coming on because I'm getting a little too upset about this one.
No, it's super maddening, man. I was chatting with Janine. I got it wrong. I thought it was 90 days was the max he could get for the crime that he's charged with, but it's like 6 months is the worst that he could be charged with. And the guy's been under house arrest effectively for 5 years. So how do you possibly end up in a place where you're like, no, he chose to be there. There's, you know, he hasn't been punished at all. We're going to assume that 5 years hasn't existed. And the answer is you have a monopoly, right? If you go into a restaurant and they give you a dirty plate and a dirty cup and, you know, there's like a rat, you know, running by your leg, you don't return. But in our current system where law is monopolized, if somebody publicly makes a declaration and a judgment on what is right and wrong, and they just completely slaughter it the way that this joker did, he doesn't have to worry about people not returning back, right? He doesn't have to worry about companies going, you know, that guy, he's unpredictable because he doesn't really find the truth and what's right. So we're not going to sign up for his services. And there's no difference between the law, private security, and food production, right? We all need them. And that's essentially the argument for like the cypherpunk movement and anarcho-capitalism, right? We can have something like the law be provided in a competitive way, just like the other things that we need for life are provided much better on a free market than with a monopoly. And I'm confident that if this was coming out of a free market, we would not have seen this decision.
Yeah, and another thing I want to point out, so this whole appeal and with the courts hasn't been completely in vain because apparently there's a freedom of information effort that's been ongoing kind of in conjunction with it. No, Shinobi, you should show the picture. It's not a gay. James is not gay.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a tradition that whenever like big events are happening or there's about to be an announcement, Assange will dress up his cat in a special tie. So this is not the only tie that the cat has. The cat has many ties, including a very ironic Uncle Sam American flag one. James is amazing. If you want to follow him, he's Embassy Cat on Twitter. He has his own Twitter account if you want to follow. One other thing I want to point out, though, is that through the freedom of information efforts that have been done, they found out that actually Sweden wanted to cancel the investigation, this whole cat and mouse game, back in 2013, 3 years after they originally, or less than 3 years after because it started end of 2010. They wanted to end all of this in 2013. And the UK convinced them to keep going with this. So the UK is the big player behind all of this. It's actually not, although Sweden has a big part and they've done a lot of really terrible things and they've handled this really poorly, most of this is coming from the UK. If it had been up to Sweden, this would have ended 3 years ago. Well, no, actually 5 years ago. Yeah.
I think it's really kind of like even more so just like, you know, that whatever that small conglomerate is, like, because I don't know. I mean, like the UK, I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, it seems at least y'all got Julian Assange and WikiLeaks over there. I mean, anybody like him from the US, you know, they speak up, they got to disappear and then they're extradited from the country. They could never show back up. I mean, like,
well, no, you're right. That's ultimately who he's hiding from, right? Because I don't think there's any charges that the UK have against him currently that are that serious to where he would not just rather face charges. Am I right, Janine? That ultimately what he's afraid of is getting extradited and black bagged over to the United States and getting the justice that we mete out in our prisons. That's what he's trying to avoid.
Right.
Yeah. And that was one of the other points that the judge made. She said that she thought that his fear of being extradited was unreasonable, which is completely bogus because literally a few days ago, the US government was telling Reuters that they are still trying to get him. Like, this is not an irrational fear. It's a real thing that has been going on since this whole thing started. Yeah, and sorry for anyone who's wondering why we're talking so much about this topic. WikiLeaks was like one of the very early adopters of Bitcoin, and so, you know, they've been getting a lot of donations of Bitcoin.
Satoshi,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Bitcoin, blasphemers.
Yeah. Yeah. Satoshi was afraid that WikiLeaks would give it too much publicity too early. It doesn't seem like that's gone too badly as far as I can tell, but you know, I think it's still related a lot to Bitcoin because, you know, a lot of the legal bills that WikiLeaks is able to pay, that was all possible because Bitcoin exists, because of the whole banking blockade that happened. And they're obviously the best example of, you know, an organization that benefited from the fact that you have censorship resistant money.
Not only that, but it also strives for real accountability, and so does freaking WikiLeaks with all this crap as far as like putting out truthful information about what these you know, big organizations are doing where other people can't see them.
And that all makes sense because he was a cypherpunk before he ever started WikiLeaks. I don't know how far to the left he's moved since then, but way back on the you know, cryptography mailing list, he was an active player way back then.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so we ready for the last doozy of a topic, guys?
I think we should skip it. I don't think we should talk about the last topic.
No.
It will get me too angry.
Well, you're gonna get angry. All right, so I know this came up maybe a month or so ago, where we were kind of discussing how Amir's, I guess, ideology or visions for things in the space wasn't really that clear, and well, I think he's kind of clarified them a lot, and I think JW is going to get kind of agitated, and I personally disagree with a lot of what's in here. But I do think it kind of it clarifies a lot of things, and I really think that everybody should at least read this for themselves. I'm going to try and give just a quick TLDR. Shut up,
JW, shut up.
Pretty much, the preamble to it is kind of just a discussion of like the nature of technology and how it is in a way a sort of power, and he kind of like harkens back a little bit to like the original like hacker movement in like the 80s and 90s in the West, and how they like people then were really driven to kind of take technology and use it as a way to shape society and not just kind of let it take a whatever course it decides to on its own. And he pretty much lays out a philosophy where he thinks that technology is something that should be subjugated by people and not something that subjugates people. And he goes on to talk in a lot more detail, kind of a roadmap for what he wants to see done in Rojava in northern Syria, and kind of lays out a vague structure for how he wants to see a society kind of bootstrap itself into a more technologically empowered society, I guess I would say. And really what he's concentrating around is educating people about technology, trying to develop and encourage the use of free technology, obviously things like Linux and open source software, and develop Bitcoin and cryptocurrency infrastructure to kind of form a foundation to build off of. And one of the things he specifically states is a national currency based off of Bitcoin. And now here from this point is kind of where I think JW gets mostly triggered, and I kind of find my disagreements.
I get triggered from word one to
okay. let me finish it, and then we can do the arguing. But pretty much like what I would describe this as is a kind of collectivist, technologically powered state that would be managed in a democratic manner. And he kind of goes into the entire rationale of educating people on technology, to deploying technology in a way to facilitate people coordinating and creating things like legal structures. And he even goes into kind of the managing the ecology of the region in Rojava, and how technology can be used to kind of like form a basis for this coordination and a basis for technologically kind of solving the problems of providing and organizing resource use. And like I fundamentally disagree with a lot of this, but I do think it's a coherent ideology or plan, unlike JW, who I'm sure will voice his reasons loudly. But I think we're going to let Janine get a word in before me and him start going at it.
Yes.
What are you talking about? I'm a total gentleman. I would never interrupt you.
Okay, so when I was reading this, I noticed obviously that there's kind of two sections to this whole thing. There's the first half where he kind of
Sorry.
where he kind of lays out like his like the political philosophy that he sees behind all of this, and then the second half is more about the how he thinks he's going to build this academy and what will be involved and where it's going to be and what Rojava needs, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of, like he mentions, they need some kind of water distribution and purification system. So outside of that would be outside of free software. But yeah, so the first part of the document that I really had a disagreement with was where he kind of has this fall from grace narrative where it's like hackers used to be super motivated, and the one statement where I completely disagree is where he said that at one time the free technology movement had major influence and had a big impact on global politics, but today it has sunk to another commodity or fashion, unable to shape society. I disagree with that because I think that free software is more prevalent throughout the general population today than it ever was like 15, 20 years ago. Like you have people using messaging apps that are, you know, they're completely open source. Like that was not something that we had back then. So yes, there's a lot of proprietary software that is still controlling a lot of infrastructure that is fundamental to our daily lives. But I would not say that I do not have this idea that free software has gotten less prevalent. I think that's like Linux. Linux is like being used in a lot of infrastructure that people rely upon today, and that's not widely known. So I don't think that narrative is correct. And then I don't have a problem really with his definition of like technics as the study of the art of techniques and constructing a positive social environment. And I liked his definition of the Polytechnic movement being the replacement of proprietary technology by autonomous self-owned technology, by people working for a civil society and human freedom. Like, I don't know if our definition of human freedom is the same, but I like that. I like that definition. And I also like the part where he said that the current dominant media landscape on the internet is only superficially diverse for the most part. It's like a fake kind of diversity, because you see that a lot of the people who control the social networks are kind of trying to impose a mass ideological conformity. So I agree with that part. Although obviously those social networks are not the entire internet. So I would disagree with it being a statement about the general internet itself. But definitely like the major platforms exhibit that. And let's see. Yeah, and I also, like Shinobi said, I like that he makes the point about technology needing to be subservient to the will of users and not something that is used as a way to control like users for ulterior purposes. Let's see. Yeah, and then the stuff about Rojava generally needing better infrastructure, open source stuff, that makes sense to me. Like, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I like that that's a goal. That sounds worthy to me. The part that I really had a problem with was the cryptocurrency section, because he says that despite the huge concentration of capital and highly skilled technical work, these efforts are not unified towards any coherent goal. I don't know. It seems kind of obvious to me that, at least in terms of like, I don't think there should be a coherent goal for cryptocurrencies in general, because this is, you know, it's a decentralized ecosystem. People can do what they want. There's no reason why they should all be following the same goal. Like, people just end up doing what they want. If he's talking in terms of just Bitcoin, I mean, I think that the coherent goal, at least on its face, is to, because he says in the document that even decentralized networks have a manifestation of some kind of ideal. And I think for Bitcoin, that is at least to build a decentralized, open access, secure, global form of money. And if you want to get more specific than that, you know, one of the things that seems kind of obvious to me from Satoshi's influence is that it's supposed to be an alternative to the inflationary hierarchical system of central banking. So that seems like a pretty coherent goal to me, even though it's not explicitly stated in, you know, the software. It's kind of an emergent phenomena. And then and then beyond that, he makes all these criticisms of like Bitcoin is, you know, because Bitcoin's price has gone up, that means it's a Ponzi scheme or it's a characteristic of a Ponzi scheme. That doesn't really make sense to me. Like that, I don't think a characteristic of Ponzi schemes in general is just the value of something goes up. That doesn't, I don't know, because people are throwing around this term Ponzi scheme way too much. That doesn't seem like, and then he also mentions he has a goal of building decentralized exchanges. He doesn't at all mention the ones that exist like BISC. And just in the last 2 days, we had HODL HODL, which is, I don't know, I haven't looked at it yet, but it's supposed to be a peer-to-peer exchange. So we have all of these things being built and he doesn't seem to be aware of them or is not willing to acknowledge them. And I don't know why. Because BISC supports a bunch of currencies in very small countries that you wouldn't expect to be part of the network. And what I find really kind of confusing is that he criticizes the fact that, you know, the Bitcoin price has gone up, except that is one of the things that has enabled the Bitcoin developers to do what they do, like not having to rely on investment money, not forcing users to give them money for development like Zcash does. It has the founder's reward. Bitcoin doesn't have that. And the reason why that works is because their developers are self-motivated, just like Amir wants. And the reason they're able to do that is because a lot of them get their income from the fact that Bitcoin's price has gone up. And I think that makes sense. Whereas in his project, like the last line of his document says that he wants to gather all of these like multidisciplinary, super motivated people, like ideologues, but he's saying money is not used to pay salaries or it's to fund public workspaces. Members work on projects with no expectation of material reward. So I don't know exactly how he's going to provide that. Like, people need to eat. So the only people who can really contribute to his project at the moment are people who already have enough wealth to completely, you know, give up everything in their life, go off and join him and work for free. Like, how many people are in a position that can do that? Like, I think most of the Bitcoin developers, if they didn't have Bitcoin, they wouldn't have, if Bitcoin hadn't been increasing in value and been adopted, I don't know if they would be able to do what they're doing. So I just don't see how, his work is going to get funded. I believe he said in a few articles that he's basically expecting some of his Bitcoin friends who have made money off of Bitcoin's price increase to kind of donate to him. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, he needs money. He's not willing to provide it to the people that are going to be working for him. So I don't know if this is going to work. Like, I don't have a strong sentiment against the feelings that he presents in his article. I agree with a lot of them, but I mean, the fall from grace thing was kind of weird. Like, I definitely don't think that free software has gone downhill.
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree with a lot of the philosophy he lies out. Like, especially like the fact that technology should be a tool that serves people. It should not be the thing shaping or controlling them. And I mean, even like he goes on to break down power into two dynamics, like coercive power or power through a leadership of ideas. And like, even that I kind of agree with. Like, what you can either try to influence somebody by convincing them, by giving them that idea that inherently has merit, or you can try to coerce them or force them into acting as an extension of your will. And like, you know, I agree with these things in principle. But then when he kind of goes into the specifics of what he's trying to implement and how he's trying to implement it, like, I disagree with it. But I disagree with it in a way where I think I think he should be allowed to do this. And like, this is something I feel is kind of an important, nuanced like point to understand. If you think we're going to get to the world of Magical Land Capistan, like collectivism is not just going to disappear. It's going to have to compete within a market, a world governed by markets. Like it's the same dynamic as the Soviet Union and what led to the Soviet Union's collapse. They attempted to organize and function as a collectivist hive internally, but they still had to manage their resources and compete in an overall capitalistic world. And what eventually led to their downfall was just the inability to manage their resources in a way that allowed them to stay competitive globally while acting in a collectivist manner internally. And I think that's exactly the kind of problems that Amir is going to run into. Like, why would, like, you know, I like the idea of implementing and building a place where people actually have control of their own technology, have control of their own infrastructure, are actually able to provide these things for themselves to better fulfill their lives in a decentralized way. But I think like incentivizing that is a huge part of that. And to just start off the bat, like you are just expected to show up and just work for work's sake. Like, I don't think that's going to be very successful in motivating people to actually do this outside of the people already there. And I think that's going to run into like inherent structural problems. Like, how do you motivate people to continue participating in a system like this if you're expecting them to do so without a reward? And I mean, like, he's completely free to do this. I wish him the best of luck, but I disagree with how he's going about trying to create this world. And I don't think it's going to go well. I don't think it will end the way he thinks it will end.
Kind of on the page with both of y'all on this. It's just like, I agree with like the sentiment of it, but the mechanics of it, like I can't get down with, just because like, yeah, you're trying to do this in Syria, but it's like I kind of understand it just because, like, you know, he went to Syria and spent some time there like in the war, right? And then came back, and now he's like thinking about going back. Is that correct, Janine or Shinobu?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I think he's looking through this filter of like, there's an answer to this problem that I'm seeing, and crypto's got some hand in it. And so he's going to try to solve it the way he sees it and the way that he has this lens on the problem. That's why I'm not going to, you know, put it down too much, because like the idea is like he's looking at it and, you know, maybe he's got some, you know, some real things that might solve some problems there. But at the same time, like we're saying, it's like you don't know about BISC because, you know, you're not where these networks are actually, you know, on the cutting edge, and like, you know, you're busy doing this thing, which I understand, but you have to understand that's like consuming your time. So you're not, that's where I feel like, I don't know, these test bed, like it's better to just like, okay, if you're not so serious as Amir because you've been in war and you want to save people's lives, but you want to try this out, I could see like some little neighborhood program within like Silicon Valley, someplace where, you know, the environment is fertile for this sort of growth, where it's not going to be so many challenges in front of you in order to get it done. That's where I really just like, I worry about this situation. And in fact, you know, anybody's health over there in Syria. And it's just, it's one of those things where, you know, I think he's trying to find an answer for a big problem. And, you know, best of luck to him.
All right. So I think I'll divide my criticism into kind of first and second part. So the first part is his philosophy, right? So he was part of the cypherpunk movement for some period of time, right? He's been around Bitcoin and related projects for a long time. So if he was going to break away from that, it would make sense for him to give specific criticisms, right? And to say, you know, the cypherpunk movement has it right here, but they're off in this area, and to actually have some back and forth, because maybe it is off in some way, right? As far as the philosophy of, you know, anarcho-capitalism. He doesn't do that. Instead, he gives us what I would say is just like an ink blot, right? It's rambling and it's incoherent in places and it's self-contradictory. And the end result is that we can all do what you guys have just done, and that's pick out things that we like and then pick out things that maybe we don't like too much. And that's a great way. That's a great recruiting tool, right? The theologians have done that stuff for hundreds of years, right? You just You write in a way that's unclear. Karl Marx did that really brilliantly, right? You pick up his stuff, you could read for 4 hours and not know what the hell he's talking about in a way that you could actually bullet point it out to somebody else. So I think that's what he's done in the philosophy side. I think it's just kind of this rambling mess. And if you were to try to summarize it paragraph by paragraph, you'd end up wanting to, jump off a building because you wouldn't be able to do it. As far as the strategy goes, I think that he has laid out some things that he wants to do. He basically wants to set up some kind of a government in Syria. And he wants to do some very specific things, but most of those things are just bad strategy, right? It's not a good idea to try to drop into Syria right now and get them to adopt Bitcoin or Monero or whatever. That's not the best possible way that we can create a more free world right now. He might think it is, and good luck with that. But it seems obviously like a really bad strategy. You can't go into an area that's war-torn and implement technology, right? When you destroy the infrastructure of an area, nobody gives a shit about Bitcoin. You need to focus on trying to get like food and water, and then you can move up to making hammers, and then you can move up to making bricks. And at some point in that progression, after you've recovered, you can look at stuff like technology and Bitcoin and things like that, right? But you have to start with the most basic human needs and work your way up. So a war-torn country is not the right place to set up an incubator. There's a reason that Y Combinator is not in Syria; it's in Silicon Valley, right? So I don't think it's I don't know what his philosophy is. I couldn't tell you if he is a communist, if he is believes in it. He's trying to set up a theocracy, because at times he says stuff about values, and it sounds like he's wanting to impose those values or make those values criteria for being in the area. That's very much like a theocracy. But then he references stuff like democracy. It's just like this crazy grab bag of every idea thrown into a blender, and then in the end, some strategies that I think are really bad ideas. So I don't really have much positive to say about it. But I have reached out to him on Twitter a couple times and asked him for clarification, and I would love to talk to him. And maybe if he's not going to do the bullet point thing that I've heard in a few presentations, but actually interact with specific concerns and specific concepts, like I'd love to hear why he thinks anarcho-capitalism doesn't work, because obviously he doesn't, but I don't know what his proposed solution is for it. So,
yeah, I think that would be, I don't know, just like we're saying, I don't know. I think it's a lot of emotions tied to with the like we just need to find an answer, and if you need to find the right words to throw it together to get people to support your idea, it's like. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's got that urgency because he's been there and he wants to get back and help people he knows there. And it's like a big thing, and a lot of moving parts in his mind with that. And like you're saying, though, I think it could serve better if, you did that sort of thing, like test environment somewhere and then transpose it over there, that sort of thing. But hey, this is real dynamic place. Maybe he's seeing something that we're not seeing, and we can have him on one day to discuss it. It would be very interesting.
The only other thing I wanted to say was it does kind of remind me of when they shut down the Cypherpunk mailing list. There was somebody that had set up one of the relay servers, and they named it Al Qaeda, and it was just like, no, this feels like a really bad idea for anybody that's trying to write free software, right? Like, you think Julian Assange took a beating? Try getting associated with Al Qaeda right after 9/11. And I don't think there's anything that you could do that would be more dangerous and like foolish in a reckless way than trying to associate yourself with militant groups in Syria right now. So, man, if you think that's the strategy, then I think you're missing out on what Bitcoin can be, where we can have people sitting in air conditioning writing software that actually frees the world. If you think you really got to go hang out with those guys in Syria, good luck, but I'm glad I don't see the world that way.
Yeah, and I would be a lot more sympathetic to his ideas and his plans if he wasn't using disparagement of Bitcoin developers to do that, because he keeps saying like they don't have a coherent goal. They're basically saying they're not doing what I think is important, therefore it's a failure. And it's like, there's this phrase that, I've said a few times where it's, or not that I've came up with, but I think Chris said it one time. He's like, don't ask not what Bitcoin can do for you, but what you can do for Bitcoin. Like, if you want to, if he wants to have those kinds of things be part of Bitcoin, then he can just make a write the code, make a pull request, see what happens. Like, I don't see, like, he's had a lot of influence over the whole Bitcoin improvement proposal process, and he was there early on. I don't see why, I think people would listen to him if he did that. I don't see why there would be resistance. So I just feel like, he should stop spending time disparaging what the Bitcoin developers are doing, and, either do it himself or, just go off and do your thing, but don't do these criticisms of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I mean, like, honestly, the first thing I thought when I really got deep enough into his actual plans of implementation is, like, this is the perfect place to try a Chaumian eCash server. Like, if you are actually going to get a government, some kind of political body in a region set up and build up this kind of infrastructure, do that. Like, find a way to distribute the control and management of the actual Bitcoin funds for that, and do it. It's scalable, it's private, and like, if you can actually get an entire region in a country behind something like this, do it. Like, let's actually try to use the tools we have now that can actually provide some kind of value in terms of actual commerce use for Bitcoin. Because we do have tools right now. It's just the issue of regulation, for the most part, that's preventing some of the best ones that we have now in terms of scalability and, like, other trade-offs that you can make. And like do that. Like, actually do something instead of just talking about all these ideas that other people are already picking at. Like, there's one you can do right now. Like, you can try right now.
Yeah, it's hard to say what exactly is going to be most effective in a zone like that. Like JW is saying, it's just so many different organizations there with different agendas and everything. It's such a headache on the ground just trying to figure out if you're with the right guys. So I don't know. Like, I wish him the best. Like I'm saying, it's a real complicated situation. I mean, like, you're trying to bring, like, Bitcoin into where it's like, yeah, like, we need to build up to that. And, if we have something that might be useful for, at this point in time, go for it. But again, it's like, are you really with the right people and all that sort of stuff? War is such a heavy question. I mean, and it's one of those things that's like, you're so passionate about that, you just see that there's this problem and you want to go fix it and you think you have the answer. And so, yeah, I think he's, like, running headstrong with it. And I wish he would be more understanding of the idea that, like, Bitcoin is, like, trying to achieve something on a global level. And, that's going to take people working on different things, and to not be so critical of not feeling your passion about this.
Yeah, as far as, one of the first stories we talked about, it's been a long show, but one of the first stories we talked about was people putting out basically putting out money for information about the BitConnect guys and whether that's dangerous or not. I don't think there's anything historically that's been as dangerous as getting a bunch of guys together in berets and a bunch of young, frustrated men that are not thinking through the consequences of their actions. They're not really interacting with the sort of the philosophy and trying to navigate and figure out, what's the best way to create a free world, but just kind of annoyed and irritated that things aren't going fast enough and good enough, and acting out of that. And I think that's really dangerous. And I think, every time I see a picture of him with the beret and the uniform thing going on and the flags in the background and trying to recruit at a Bitcoin conference, I just think, that's usually not the way things start out when they end with, peaceful technology and solutions to real problems. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see him as, like, a malicious person. I don't think he's doing this out of any malcontent. I just think he's had to deal with a lot in the last several years with, you know, going to Syria and fighting and watching people get killed, and that I can't even imagine what that's like, or how much it affected him. So I definitely don't think he's being malicious with this, and I don't see any problem with him attempting it. I don't necessarily think it will be successful based on what I've seen in the document, but I have nothing against him trying it. And I think any kind of like basic organization, or at least a group of people getting together and being like, hey, we're going to, because like they like food, one of the food issue is actually one of the things he wants to solve, according to the document, because he says like the ecosystem has been destroyed because of all the war, and so they need to first get water, and they want to, you know, build up the land so that it's possible to buy food, and then they'll get to, or not buy food, grow food, and then they'll get to the issue of, you know, free software and being able to communicate with the different areas and the wider world in general. So that seems like a good enough reason to wish that everything goes well with it.
Right, but the problem is that the whole reason that these problems exist is from war. And the reason that we have war is because we have a central bank. And the reason that we have a central bank is that people are not able to choose their own money. So you go pretty much from that root problem to Bitcoin pretty directly. And so to be saying, hey, we haven't made any progress when the price of Bitcoin has gone up is just not.
Yeah, that's why I think he's I think he's misguided on that point, and the fact that he almost called Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme for that reason doesn't seem intellectually honest.
We can't defund war without making a secure money, and we can't have a secure money unless it goes up in value. So
yeah. So I guess I don't know. My brain's kind of fucking wrung out dry. Anybody got any last thoughts for the day?
No, I have no more thoughts. I'm completely drained of thoughts as well.
Yeah, I just had one, and that was like a tweet that I saw posted, was saying that Arizona had passed a law saying that they'd accept Bitcoin for taxes now. So
confirmed.
If you're in Arizona and you got Bitcoin and you want to pay some taxes, and or you got Bitcoin and you want to pay your taxes, and Bitcoin moved to Arizona, or it'll change in your neck of the woods soon enough.
Yep. This is I mean, the states in the United States have already had something like marijuana legalization start fracturing connection to the federal government. I think Bitcoin is going to be that on steroids. Yeah. And 1 second, Janine's throwing this up for you. I'm about to ban all of you from providing me links in the middle of the show.
Yeah, I would just like us all to bow down to our new Bitcoin guru. Actually, no, just cryptocurrency guru in general. Apparently, he's just a guru about everything cryptocurrency. He's 11 years old. Apparently.
This seriously happened in the dot-com bubble. There was like 11-year-olds that were pitching startups. That's unbelievable.
My goodness.
Also,
I list of experts.
Apparently,
no more.
No, come on, one more. Come on. Okay, but I'm not sure if this is the kid, but people are saying that there's a young kid doing an ICO that might be him. So please, this is not investment advice. Do not buy any coin just because we showed you a picture of an 11-year-old. I just want to share this because like this is so me. Like if I had a Patronus, it would be a Dogecoin.
Or deny my like or dislike for Harry Potter.
You don't like Harry Potter, Shinobi?
I will neither confirm nor deny that.
Okay.
I feel good that I got that one on the back burner. One weekend, I'm just gonna be like, man, there's nothing to do. I'll watch Harry Potter for the first time, and so yeah, I guess it'll be entertaining then because I've heard good things.
I will neither confirm nor deny that. I guess if we're all tapped for thoughts, thanks for listening, guys. I know it was a long one today. If you liked it, you can like and subscribe. If not, don't.
If not, see you in Syria.
We'll see you guys
Later.